Ugh, obviously I'm crying again. I like probably won't stop until the book ends. This is it. This is just me crying until the book ends. I hope you're having a fun time. You know who should feel guilty? Adian, always, every day. You, not so much. Rowan, you're out here doing your best. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Michelle. This is the second video in our Kingdom of Ash recap. So if you haven't watched the first one, you should probably start there because we're like on chapter 20. In the last video, I was like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna cry on camera this time. And then I did indeed cry on camera multiple times. I'm not going to make you that sort of promise this time because I want you to know while I was making this video, I sobbed so hard I burst a blood vessel in my face. Nothing like major. And you can't see it now because I have it covered with concealer. But I did. I like cried so hard I burst some blood vessels. So I have no chill about Throne of Glass. None whatsoever. Alright, let's do like a super 1 second recap over where everyone's at since the last video. So we have Kale and Irene. They are in Anel and they are waiting for Morinth's troops to descend. They have like 3 days. They have a small fleet of Rookin that have come there to help them, but like it's gonna be a tricky situation because Morinth like vastly outnumbers them, and it's gonna be ugly. We're actually not gonna interact with them. I don't know if we see them at all in this video. Next video will be all about Anel, pretty much. But for now, I don't know if we even touched them in this video. But that's what they're doing. Then we have, down below, we have Adian and the crew. Adian and Lysandra, pretending to be Aelin, just took all of the troops without permission to Terrasen's border. There was conversations. Erewhon's sending troops, they know that. There was conversation about whether to fall back to Orinth and protect Orinth, or to try to protect the border. And Adian did not get permission from the lords. In fact, he got explicitly told not to do that, but he is going to take the troops to the border anyway, thanks to Lysandra Aelin, who arranged this to happen. Shout out to the girlies. And then we also have Manon and 13. They are currently with the Crocian witches. They found them and now they're hanging out and Manon is trying to figure out how she can be declared Queen of the Crocians so she can call the Crocians to war, because that is only something the Queen of the Crocians can do, and it's something, although Manon is queen by blood, she is not being accepted as the queen by the people, and so that power means nothing. And Dorian, meanwhile, is also trying to learn how to shift because he is trying to figure out how he's going to get into Morinth to steal the third word key. Most of this section will be set with our rescue crew. We have recently found out where Aelin is being held, or the rescue crew did. We've kind of known. The rescue crew, which is Rowan, Elide, Lorcan, and Gabriel, have just figured out that Aelin is being held in Doranelle, and they are headed there to rescue her. Meanwhile, Aelin is still being very actively tortured. Okay, great. Let's jump into it. We open this section with Aelin, and she's chilling in a gorgy little forest, chilling in a meadow with her aunt. Her aunt says, "Do you know the story of the queen who walked through worlds? It is a sad story and it is an old one." Aelin lifted an eyebrow. "Aren't I a little old for fairy tales?" She'd indeed just celebrated her 20th birthday 3 days ago in another clearing not far from here. Half of Doranelle had come. It had seemed, and yet her mate had found a way to sneak her away from the revelry, all the way to the secluded pool in the forest heart. Her face still warmed to think of that moonlit swim, what Rowan had made her feel, how he'd worshipped her in the sun-warmed water. Mate. The word was still a surprise, as it had been to arrive here at Spring's End and see him beside her aunt's throne, and simply know. And in the months since their courting, Aelin indeed blushed at the thought of it. What they'd done in that forest pool had been the culmination of these months, in an unleashing. The mating marks on her neck and on Rowan's proved it. She would not be returning to Terrasen alone when autumn arrived. I actually hate it here. This is horrifying to me that Maeve implanted these memories into Aelin. If you haven't caught on, this is not what is actually happening. Maeve is an evil lady not hanging out with Aelin in the forest. She is trying to trick Aelin into revealing where the word keys are, and part of the way she's doing that is by tapping into her memories and distorting them. And this one particularly, we get in a lot of detail, and it feels quite harrowing to know that Maeve planted these memories of kind of a full life with Rowan, and these moments of quiet intimacy between Rowan and Aelin, which are just fabrications of Maeve's that she's planted in Aelin's mind. Just truly horrifying. Anyway, back to the story. So Maeve decides to tell Aelin the story, and I'm going to read you this whole story pretty much because I think it's important. So buckle up. Long ago, when the world was new, when there were no human kingdoms, when no wars had marred the earth, a young queen was born. She did not know she was a queen. Amongst her people, power was not inherited, but simply born. And as she grew, her strength rose with her. She found the land she dwelled in to be too small for that power, too dark and cold and grim. She had gifts similar to many wielded by her kind, but she had been given more. A power, a sharper, more intricate weapon, enough that she was different. Her people saw that power and bowed to it, and she ruled them. Word spread of her gifts, and 3 kings came to seek her hand, to form an alliance between their throne and the one she had built for herself. Small as it might have been, for a time she thought it would be the newness, the challenge that she had always craved. 3 kings were brothers, each mighty in his own right, their power vast and terrifying. She picked the eldest among them, not for any particular skill or grace, but for his countless libraries. What she might learn in his lands, what she might do with her power. It was that knowledge she craved, not the king himself. So they were wed, and she left her small territory to join him in his castle. For a time she was contented, both by her husband and the knowledge his home offered her. He and his 2 brothers were conquerors and spent much of their time away, leashing new lands to their shared throne. She did not mind. Not when it gave her freedom to learn as she would, but her husband's libraries contained knowledge even he did not realize was held within, lore and wisdom from worlds long since turned to dust. She learned that there were indeed other worlds, not the dark blasted realm in which they lived, but worlds beyond that, living atop one another and never realizing it. Worlds where the sun was not a watery trickle through ash clouds, but a golden stream of warmth. Worlds where green existed. She had never heard of such a color, green. Nor had she heard of blue, not the shade of the sky that was described. She could not so much as picture it. And the more she read about these other worlds where long-dead wayfarers had once roamed, the more she wanted to see them. To know the kiss of sun on her face, to hear the morning songs of sparrows, the crying of gulls over the sea. That sea, too, was foreign to her. An endless sprawl of water with its own moods and hidden depths. All they had in her lands were shallow, murky lakes and half-dried streams. So while her husband and his 2 brothers were off waging yet another war, she began to ponder how she might find a way into one of these worlds. How she might leave. Using the very language of existence itself, doors might be opened, however briefly, between worlds. It was forbidden, outlawed long before her husband and his brothers were born. Once the last of the ancient wayfarers had died out, the paths between realms were sealed, their methods of world-walking lost within them. Or so all had thought. But deep in her husband's private library, she found old spells. She began with small experiments. First, she opened a door to the realm of resting, to find one of those wayfarers and ask how it was properly done. A knowing smile. The wayfarer refused to tell her, so the queen began to teach herself, opening and closing doors long since forgotten or sealed, peering deep into the workings of the cosmos. Her own world became a cage. She grew tired of her husband's warring, his casual cruelty. And when she went away to war once again, the queen gathered her closest handmaidens, opened a door to a new world, and left the one she'd been born into. She left, Aelin blurted. She just left her own world permanently? It had never been her world, not really. She had been born to rule others. Where did she go? That smile grew a bit, to a fair, lovely world, where there was no war, no darkness, not like that which was she had been born. She was made a queen there too, was able to hide herself within a new body so that none could know what she was beneath, so that even her own husband would not recognize her. Did he ever find her again? No, though he looked, found out all she learned and taught it to himself and his brothers. They tore apart world after world trying to find her. And when they arrived at the world where she had made her new home, they did not know her. Even as they went to war, she did not reveal herself. She won, and 2 of the kings, her husband included, were banished back to their own world. The 3rd remained trapped, his power nearly broken. He crawled off to the depths of the earth, and the victorious queen spent her long, long existence preparing for his return, preparing her people for it. For 3 kings had gone beyond her methods of world walking. They had found a way to permanently open a gate between worlds, and had made 3 keys to do so. To wield those keys was to control all worlds, to have the power of eternity in the palm of your hand. She wished to find them, only so she might possess the strength to banish any enemies, banish her husband's youngest brother back to his realm. To protect her new, lovely world. It was all she had ever wanted, to dwell in peace without the shadow of her past hunting her. From far away, that ghost of memory pushed, as if forgotten, to douse a flame left burning in her room. And did the queen find the keys? Maeve's smile turned sad. Do you think she did, Aelin? And Aelin is contemplating this as Rowan appears in the glen, and Aelin thinks back over the weeks they've spent together in Maeve's palace, falling in love. And Aelin thinks, it says to the queen, I think the queen found the keys. She's a really smart lady, so I'm sure she found them. And Maeve is like, okay, where do you think she found them, Aelin? And then Aelin goes, I think Something tugs at her. It's almost as if she can feel shackles on her wrist. There's this feeling that there's another world that she can feel just under the surface of this one. And then she looks up at Rowan and she remembers that her mate has tattoos on his face that told a sad story caused by a dark, awful queen. And this Rowan has no tattoos on his face. Maeve says to Aelin, "Where are the keys, Aelin?" And Aelin just says no in response. And then Maeve has Rowan fly over to her. Rowan shifts into hawk form. He flies over to her and naps his neck. And Aelin can feel the mating bond shredding between them. Just can feel that dissolving in the mating bond that happens when her mate dies. And then Aelin comes back to herself and realizes that none of that was real. Here in the real world, though, she's chilling on this altar, the stone altar that she's been in for the whole book so far, and her arm is completely broken. Like, every single bone on her arm is broken, and it is shredded, and Aelin is, like, screaming, obviously, because it's very uncomfortable. And Maeve says to her, "Do you know what pains me most, Aelin?" Maeve's words were soft as a lover's. "It is that you believe I am the villain in this." Her iron coffin has been repaired. It's messy. It does not look as cute as it did before. It has just, like, large chunks of iron, like, welded over the top to reinforce that top that Aelin almost burst through. Maeve says to her, "I have no doubt that your mate or Elena or even Brandon himself filled your head with lies about what I'll do with the keys. I meant what I said. I like this world. I do not wish to destroy it, only improve it. Imagine there's a realm where there's no hunger, no pain. Isn't that what you and your cohorts are fighting for? A better world?" And Maeve is trying to convince her that she's like, "If you give me the keys, you won't even have to sacrifice yourself. You can live a long, beautiful life with Rowan here in Doranelle." Like, Maeve's like, "I only want to save this world. Like, I was in a gross world with the Valg boys, and you've seen the Valg boys. Ew, do you blame me for wanting to come here? Like, obviously, it makes the most sense just to, like, let me take care of this Valg husband of mine and his brothers who are being super annoying. I'll send them back. You can chill here, and we'll have, like, literally the perfect world ever." Doesn't that sound so fun? And Aelin is getting so lost at this point. She, like, does not know what's true and what is a lie, but a voice inside her whispers, "You do not yield. Like, we do not give up this information. Like, no matter what you believe or don't believe, like, you do not give up information about where the word keys are. You do not yield." And Maeve explains to her that all this time in Iron is making Aelin's magic build up, which is something that we've kind of seen and I've mentioned. Aelin's magic is just building up. She was having to, like, remember in, like, last book, she was having to release magic, like, quite regularly to keep it from, like, bubbling over. And she really hasn't been able to release any magic in, at this point, like, 2 months. And so she can, like, feel it, like, pressure under her skin. And then Maeve says to her, "I'm leaving for a few days to go deal with some Valg. They've got a few extra collars, and I'm going to go grab one and put it on you." And Maeve says, "I'm sure Karn is going to find plenty of ways to entertain you while I'm gone. Well, it's just you and him." Aelin is, like, freaking out. And Fenris is in the room with her. She's alone with Fenris in the room, and Fenris blinks, "Are you all right?" And Aelin blinks back, "No." She's so terrified of Maeve putting the collar on her because she knows once the collar's on her, it is likely she'll be unable to resist the questioning, that she will have to reveal the position of the lost word keys, which aren't lost, she knows we're there. And Fenris blinks, "I am here, I am with you." And Aelin blinks back in return, "I am here, I am with you." Her magic surged, seeking a way out, filling the gaps between breaths and bones. She couldn't find room for it, couldn't find anything to soothe it. "You do not yield." She focused on her mother's words, on that voice. Fenris blinks again, "I am here, I am with you." Karn comes in, pops her back in her iron coffin, and explains that Maeve has decided to move her somewhere else because Morinth is, like, creeping about. So up until this point, Aelin has been inside the Maeve's castle at the center of Doranelle, but she's getting moved elsewhere because, one, Maeve won't be in town, and two, Maeve is, like, a little suspicious that Morinth is, like, poking around. And Karn says to her, "It seems like this might be our last little bout of fun before she puts a collar on you, and I can do whatever I want." And Karn has been torturing her this entire time, and he is the worst. You know, like, honestly, he's in my mind one of the bigger villains in this book, just because, like, his motivations are so nasty. That's just, like, he enjoys it. Like, why are you here and why are you doing this, my friend? Like, him and Arabin, public enemy number 1. Dread quailed in her stomach, smothering the pressure. Moving her to another location, she had once warned a young healer about that. Had told her that if an attacker tried to move her, they would most definitely kill her. And she was to make a final stand before they could. And that was without the threat of a wordstone collar, traveling closer with each passing day. But Karn wouldn't kill her, not when Maeve needed her alive. Aelin focused on breathing. In and out. In and out. It didn't keep the oily, sharp fear from taking hold, from making her start shaking. Aelin is starting to feel very desperate and despairing because she feels that she probably has like days left before this wordstone collar gets placed on her, and she's scared. Meanwhile, little does she know, the rescue crew, they're right outside of Doranelle. Yay, they're coming for you, girlie. Aelin, just hold on for like a few more days. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. And we learn like very quickly that that wordstone collar that Maeve is going to try to grab is actually a trap. That was the rumor that the crew, especially Rowan, planted so that Maeve would leave the city. They knew that it needed to be something that was like super alluring to get her out of there. And so that is actually Rowan's doing a little bit. And Rowan is feeling like deeply guilty that he didn't come to Doranelle sooner, that they like didn't listen to Elide immediately and come to Doranelle. Like they wasted so much time. They wasted days and months, and like he could have rescued his girl earlier, but like we can't do that. We're gonna just move forward, Rowan, okay? You know who should feel guilty? Adian, always, every day. You, not so much. Rowan, you're out here doing your best. Okay? Adian, I don't believe he's doing his best. Yeah, I don't buy that Adian is trying his best. We'll talk about Adian in this section. I have words for him. I have some words from Adian. But we're not there yet. Let's deal with our crew that we have at hand. They like arrive in Doranelle, and Rowan is having these like very like complicated feelings about being here because the city was his home for so long, but he looks around and he's like not sure it's his home anymore. Like he's like, it wasn't my did it stop becoming my home when I married this foreign queen, or when I killed so many of its people during that battle on the coast of Ellywe? And he knows that Gabriel and Lorcan are probably dealing with similar things because all of them lived in this city for centuries, for decades. I don't know, a long time. There's a few bridges into the city, but like the only way in is through the bridge. Like the rivers run like way too fast to try to like swim across. And so they're gonna have to get across on one of the bridges. And they really do need to like do some recon. They like don't know where in the city Maeve is holding Aelin. They have like really no idea. Or if she's in the city, she could be like on Doranelle the city, and then there's like Doranelle the island proper. She could be like anywhere on the island, realistically. And they like really need to scope things out. And Lorcan's like, okay, let's take a day to like assess things, see if we can like figure out a way in. And Rowan is like, a day is too long for us to like try to figure out what we're doing. And Lorcan's like, okay, well, a hasty plan is gonna like cost everyone badly. Like that's gonna make things worse. And Gabrielle's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna camp for the night. We're gonna assess things in the morning. We need to rest. We're like, need to have some sleepy time because no one makes good choices if they haven't had sleep, you know? And Rowan thinks to himself, the idea was abhorrent. Sleeping while Aelin was mere miles away. His ears strained, as if he might pick up on her screams on the wind. But Rowan said, fine. He's like, okay. Like, that logically makes sense. I understand that we need to sleep. Kind of like making their way to camp. They're going to camp a little bit closer to like the logistics of this. I'm not sure, map-wise. We're not given a map of Doranelle, so I don't know where they are. But they're like out, they're not looking over the city now, they're now looking over a beach. And as they're like walking over there, Rowan says to Elide, like, you don't have to come into the city with us when we go in to do recon tomorrow. But Elide isn't really paying attention because she's looking around and she's realized that there is an army surrounding Doranelle. That they're on like one of these coasts of Doranelle, and a huge army camp is set up. And Gabrielle's like, whoa, she has summoned most of her forces here. And they come to realize that Aelin 1 could be anywhere in that camp, or anywhere in the city. Like, this is actually like doubled the locations that Aelin could feasibly be. And Elide's like, did she bring an army to keep us out of the city? And Lorcan's like, or to keep Aelin in. And Gabrielle's like, okay, we like really need to like get in contact with some of our allies in the city. Maybe they could feed us some information. And Rowan is like, no, we can't trust anyone. Like, Maeve could have gotten into their mind, and we like cannot risk it. Like, if she hears that we are here for Aelin, she's going to lock that down. We only have like one chance to do this while she is gone, and we cannot risk her finding out. And Elide says, Maeve doesn't know me. Like, she like saw me on the beach, but like she literally was not paying attention to me. And I'm sure she didn't like relay information about me to like everyone. And so I can go into the city and get more information. And Lorcan is immediately like, no, absolutely not, tiny girly. I'm not letting you into the city. That's too dangerous. And Elide turns to Lorcan and says, you are not my commander. You are not my court. And then she turns to Rowan. Is clearly being like, Rowan is the boss man of me. He is like the crown prince of Terrasen. Like, I do answer to him. And Lorcan turns to Rowan and says, she doesn't know the city layout. She doesn't know how to handle the guards. Like, she was so unprepared for this. And Gabrielle says, then we teach her. Tonight, we teach her what we know. And Lorcan is like, no. It is too dangerous to send my tiny little girly into the city. And Elide is like, actually, I will be going into that city tomorrow. And Lorcan's like, okay, what's your plan? You're gonna just walk in there and be like, has anyone seen Aelin Galathinius? Ask if Maeve herself is available for high tea. Like, what's the plan, Elide? Which, Lorcan, this is offensive. Elide is a smart, conniving little girl. She's conniving. That's why the witches picked her up. They said, you are smart. You are conniving. She's not, of course, she's not going to just wander in there and be like, hey, has anyone seen Aelin? She says to them, I'm going to ask after Karn. Surely a young mortal woman is allowed to inquire about a female who jilted her. Obviously, Lorcan went pale as the moon above. Elide, when she didn't reply, Lorcan whirled on Rowan. We'll scout. There's another way. Please don't send Elide in there by herself. Elide only said to Rowan, find Cairn and we find Aelin. And learn if Maeve remains or if she's left the city. Fear no longer bloomed in Elide's eyes. Not a trace remained in her scent, so Rowan nodded, even as Lorcan tensed. Good hunting, lady. Rowan is like, you know what? If a little lady wants to go in and try to find Aelin, I'm gonna let her. Meanwhile, Lorcan is freaking out because his girly, that's his little girly, you know? He doesn't love sending her away. Meanwhile, let's check on our troops down in Terrasen. Lysandra is out kind of scouting ahead on the southern border as the troops make this passage down the mountains. It is winter, so it is like cold and snowy everywhere in Terrasen. She loves flying around. Girlie loves a flight. The people of these southern villages have fled north, so there's like no one around here. They've kind of evacuated everyone north to keep them safe from Terrasen's troops. The lands are like really empty, and she's just kind of like flying around, having a nice time when she finally sees Erewhon's troops. Ren had taught her how to like count large numbers of men quickly, like how to count troops. And she realizes there are 50,000 men. 50,000 men led by Ilkin. And she also spots 5 Valg princes wearing the Wordstone colors. And she knows in the entire Terrasen Legion, they only have 25,000 men. So they have half as many men as the Moranth Legion. Also, I mean, they do have like Fae, but like the Ilkin are like dangerous guys, and so are the Valg princes. The two armies met in the snow-covered fields of southern Terrasen. Terrasen's general prince had ordered them to wait rather than to rush to meet Moranth's legions, to let Erewhon's hordes exhaust themselves on the foothills, and to send an advance force of the silent assassins to pick off soldiers struggling amid the bumps and hollows. Only so the assassins had returned. So although this Terrasen has made like a show of force, and Lysandra as Aelin is out like in the front of the battle to like get everyone pumped, Aelin is not using her fire magic to help because obviously it's Lysandra and she doesn't have any. Fae soldiers are able to like keep the Valg at bay, but then the Ilkin start taking them out. And the Fae were putting up like shields to protect the people against the Valg soldiers and their magic. They were able to like defend the troops, but the Ilkin have like venom that melts through Fae shields, apparently. Okay. And they're the flying Ilkin, and Lysandra turns into wyvern form, and she is able to get some of them, but there's just like so many of them that she cannot like cut through the Ilkin in a way that is like at all feasible. And she eventually has to like leave wyvern form because it is too big of a target. The right flank broke first against one of the Valg princes, and the Bane are just being like continually pushed back, and the Fae are just like barely slowing Moranth. Like it is not going well at all. And by nightfall on the second day, the Bane's lines had buckled. Still, Moranth did not stop coming. So things are going poorly up in Terrasen. Meanwhile, Elide is out on her little scouting mission in Doranelle. She goes into Doranelle, like over the bridge, has no issues. Mortals, if you're not pure Fae, you can't live in Doranelle unless you get special permission from Maeve, but you can visit for the day. You can get a little day pass. Okay? So she's in there for the day, and she's immediately, this place is actually kind of like gorgeous and beautiful and amazing. Like it seems like a paradise. So this is so crazy that evil lady rules it because like honestly the vibes are so fun. There's like lots of Fae and also like Fae in animal form, so there's like leopards walking around on the street, which is fun and cute and fresh, and it's just like gorgeous. There's like pink flowers spilling out of the windows. It is like very like Provence, France vibes, but with like a little Venice mixed in is the vibes I'm getting from the book. Elide's limp is getting worse now that she's getting further from Gabriel and he's unable to like brace her leg with the magic, and she like recounts that last night Lorcan just spent the whole night like arguing about why she shouldn't go. Hilarious. Also, yeah, obviously that's what Lorcan was gonna do. Do we have any questions about it? And we also come to find out that she finds when she's like packing her bags, getting ready to head up here, because she's a little plan, little scheme, we'll talk about it when we get to it, she found in Lorcan's bag strips of linen ready for her next cycle. Elide makes her way to a town square and she pulls a mirror out of her bag. She's pretending she's like checking her appearance, obviously, but she's actually using it to scope out to the tavern that's behind her. She's like being sneaky. This is the third tavern she stopped by, but this one is a good one because there are soldiers there. She can like see soldiers in their uniforms and she's like, okay. Elide walks up to the table, intentionally looking like she's been crying. Like she has like rubbed berries around her eyes. She's like looking just like forlorn. And she's like, excuse me. And she's stammering a bit because remember, Girly Pop is an actress. And one of the ladies at the table, there's like 2 women. One of the first lady says, is something wrong? And Elide is like, I was just looking for someone. He said he'd be here, but I saw your uniform and I thought you might be able to help me. I thought you might know him. And the other woman says, okay, what's his name? Maybe we can help you. And Elide's like, well, I don't want to bother you guys. Like, I know you guys are probably like in the middle of lunch. I don't want to interrupt. And the first lady is like, it's not a bother. The boys at the table do seem a little annoyed. The boys at the table do seem annoyed, but the girlies follow girl code, and so they're like, hey, we want to help you out. And they're like, can we get you something to eat or drink? Like, she's clearly been traveling. She's stinky. She's a little, like, messy. She's been crying. The girlies are like, girl needs a snack. And Elide is like, no. I do not want to trouble you. And the boys are like, okay, what's his name? Okay, what's his name? And Elide goes, Karen. He serves the queen. Do you know him? And the girlies go still. And one of the men is like, we do know him. Are you his lover? And one of the other guys says, if you escaped Karen, don't go looking for him again. Karen is, and then one of the other commanders is like, hey, you can't say that. Karen is like bloodsworn to the queen. And he's like, that doesn't stop him from being like an absolute and total prick. You know, like he's still not a good guy, even if he's bloodsworn to Maeve. And the girlies are like, okay, we don't know where he is, so sorry. But Elide can tell that they're lying. And she's like, dang it. She's like, okay, I'm gonna have to do better the next tavern. I think I looked a little too, like, disheveled. And, like, probably they don't want to send someone like this, like, hot messy to Karen's dorm. So I'm gonna have to, like, look a little more pulled together. We'll try a slightly different approach at the next tavern. And she's, like, headed out of there. She's, like, in an alleyway checking her makeup when one of the girls comes up behind her. Cut to everyone on the shore. The boys are waiting for Elide to come back. Lorcan is literally like dying from impatience. He is so stressed out. He's like never been this stressed in his life because there's nothing he can do except like wait for her to return. They're patrolling the city edge. Rowan, luckily, put Lorcan on the edge of the city that is going to be closest to where Elide will probably return from. Rowan has like come over to check on him and be like, hey, they've like learned the patrols and like the schedules and things that they've been able to gather from like out here. And Lorcan is like trying to participate in this conversation about like patrols and guards and like the best times to like try to get into the city. But he's just thinking about Elide. All he can think about is his girly. And the sun is setting and Elide is not back and Lorcan is like, I am giving her 30 more minutes before I go into that city and go get her myself. Which is like, that's not going to go well. I'm sure everyone knows to keep an eye out for Lorcan, but like Lorcan is like, I'm gonna go get her. The sun inched closer to the horizon. Lorcan began pacing. Too long. It had taken too long. The others had fallen silent, gazing down the hill, waiting. A slight tremor rocked Lorcan's hands, and he balled them into fists, squeezing hard. 5 minutes. He'd go in 5 minutes. Aelin, Galathinius, and their plan be damned. Aelin had trained to endure torture. Elide... He could see those scars on her from her shackles, see her main foot and ankle. She had endured too much suffering and terror already. He couldn't allow her to face another heartbeat of it. He's like, no. Aelin, she's fine. She's, like, pretty much is, like, practiced at this, honestly. She actually probably is having a nice time. But Elide, she's, no. She's struggling. I know she's struggling. I'll go get her. But then Elide emerges. He doesn't have to go get her. As she emerges, it says, Lorcan's legs wobbled so violently he had to he sat back on a rock where he'd been perched. Lorcan is struggling. You know, he's like, oh my gosh. He has to literally sit down because he was so worried about Elide. I love Lorcan and Elide so much, okay? Bring that man to his knees, girly pop. I love it. I like truly do. I adore it. This is why I adore them. Because she's just like tiny and is like so brave and so strong and so tough. And like Lorcan is like exteriorly so brave, strong, tough. But he is also like, his knees are shaking at the thought of her not returning. Actually, not even the thought of her not returning. Like seeing her, the relief on seeing her return makes his knees wobble. So he can't even stand up. Ah, it's cutie patootie. And Rowan is like, okay, what happened? And Elide says, I met someone. And then we get a little flashback. Elide had thought she was about to die when that dark-haired fae approached her in that alley. And the girl says, I only wish to talk to you in private. My name is Asar, and I think I am a friend of your friends. You played your part well as the mistreated lover, but you should stay far and well away from Karen. And Elide is like, I need to find him. It is like very, 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 very importante. And Asar is like, okay, he was in the city until yesterday. Then he went out to the eastern camp. That's where he is now. I have a sister who's out there, and she has seen him. And Elide is like, why should I believe you? And Asar says, because you are wearing Lorcan's shirt and Rowan Whitethorn's cloak. If you do not believe me, inform them of who told you this information, and they will let you know that I'm like a trustworthy lady. And she says, Lorcan and I were involved for a time. And Elide, even though this is like chaos is happening, she's trying to like rescue Aelin. She's trying to be tough and brave and try to make sure she's not getting murdered, okay? Elide still feels that jealousy in her stomach. She's like, stay away from my man, my 6'8" red flag man, okay? He might be full of red flags, but they're my red flags. Asar continues on. Look, you don't need to believe me, but you should not go to taverns asking about Karen. No one likes him. This is going to not end well for you. And Elide's like, do you happen to know where Maeve is? And then, for some reason, Asar is Sherlock Holmes' genius, and she puts together that Maeve must have Aelin. Everyone in the town felt that burst of power come out of Aelin. They didn't know it was Aelin, but they like felt that burst of power that drew Rowan and the gang to them. Everyone in Doranelle felt it as well. And Asar is like, well, Maeve isn't in town, but I have no idea when she will be back. Like, but she is gone. And so Elide reports this all back to the boys, and she says, just before dawn, Elide explains to the boys, Dresenda said the watch, that's Asar's sister, said the watch on the eastern camp is weakest at dawn. That she'll find a way for the guards to be occupied. It's our only window. Can I just say, let's just pause for a second. I love that although like we have Adian and Rowan and Gabrielle and Lorcan, who are all these like generals, they have this knowledge of the military and they like know how things should be done. I love that it's Elide and Lysandra who are like actually carrying out the plans that are allowing them to, you know, do things. Like Lysandra with Nox, that like the plan that allowed them to go to Terrasen southern border, and Elide with this girly actually like having like one, finding out where Aelin is, and then like honestly like constructing half the plan of how to get her. I just think it's like so cool and so fun and so fresh. Like the boys might know war, but the girlies know how to network. Elide goes on, she doesn't know if Aelin is with Karn, but there's a possibility that, you know, there's a small possibility that Maeve took Aelin with her. Like, we don't know where Aelin is, but we know Karn is at this eastern camp. And Rowan is like, we have to risk it. Like, we have to go and check. Like, if there's even, like, a strong possibility that Aelin could be there, like, we need to go. And Gabrielle's like, okay, we should start heading in that direction. Rowan, look at me in my eyeballs right now. Do not fly in hawk form over to that camp. That would be stupid. Okay? I know, I can see it in your little brain. I can see the gears turning. No. You stay with us. We'll all walk together. We'll make a plan and we'll get your girly. But you can't just fly over there. And then they plan. They spend that night making a scheme, making a plan. Okay, here's the plan. You ready? This is the map that I've made of the camp. Isn't it gorgeous? Rowan's going to go in the southern entrance. Gabrielle and Lorcan are at the eastern entrance. And they're going to do a little magic at Rowan's signal to distract everyone at the camp. Bring the attention over here so Rowan can get Aelin and get out. Elide, meanwhile, is hiding. Elide is actually way up in the corner hiding because she's a mortal girly. So if things get scary, they like cannot be watching out for her. It is actually better if she just like stays far out of the way. So she's a couple miles into the forest, just hanging out in a glen. And if things get scary, she's actually supposed to run away. Will that go well for her to just be like loose in this fey forest with no one to help her and just running by herself? She'll be okay. Remember, she walked like a good distance through Oakwald. Rowan didn't have the words to convey his gratitude for what Elide had done, the unexpected ally she found. Rowan is so grateful for her. That night, everyone is kind of sleeping. Everyone is resting for just a minute, and this plan is going to take place just before dawn, and Rowan isn't sleeping through the night, obviously. There's no way Rowan is sleeping. And Rowan is just hoping that Aelin is in that camp. And even if Aelin isn't there, maybe he will torture Karen for a little bit. Like, that would make him feel a little better if Aelin's not there. And then he prayed to Mala to keep Aelin safe. Overhead, the stars shone clear and bright. Though Mala had only appeared to him once at dawn, on the foothills across this very city, though she might be little more than a strange, mighty being from another world, he offered up a prayer anyway. Then he had begged Mala to protect Aelin from Maeve when they had entered Doranelle, to give her strength and guidance and to let her walk out alive. Then he had begged Mala to let him remain with Aelin, the woman he loved. The goddess had been little more than a sunbeam in the rising dawn, and yet he had felt her smile at him. Tonight, with only the cold fire of the stars for company, he begged her once more. A curl of wind sent his prayer drifting to those stars, to the waxing moon slivering the camp, the river, the mountains. He had killed his way across the world. He had gone to war and back more times than he cared to remember. And despite it all, despite the rage and despair and ice he'd wrapped around his heart, he'd still found Aelin. Every horizon he'd gazed towards. Guys, I told you this was going to be bad. We haven't even gotten to the sad part yet. Every horizon he'd gazed towards, unable and unwilling to rest during those centuries, every mountain and ocean he'd seen, and wondered what lay beyond, it had been her. It had been Aelin. The silent call of the mating bond driving him, even when he could not feel it. They'd walked this dark path together, back to the light, and he would not let the road end here. Drying my eyes, checking on the witches. The 13 and the Crocians are hanging out, and things are tense. They're like recovering. Sorry, I'm like still crying. We're fine. We're fine. The 13 and the Crocians are hanging out. Things are tense, as they spent like the next week recovering from that Iron Teeth attack. Apparently, this camp where they're staying is one of the oldest camps, and it's where they send the young witches to kind of like initiate them into adulthood. They like go on like essentially like a cutie little camping trip where they like learn how to hunt and survive in the wild, and then like boom, 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 you're an adult. And Manon is like talking to Glennis about this, and she asks Glennis, she's like, do you know what the Iron Teeth initiation is? It's killing a Crocian, if you've forgotten. Her and Glennis like kind of talk about that a little bit, and you know, Glennis does know that, but like she's still like so willing to let Manon grow, which is like so honestly kind of generous of her. And they are headed out tomorrow to Ellywe because they pledged to help the Crocians down there, and the 13 and Dorian will be flying with them. During these days, Dorian has been practicing his shifting, and he like at first was like, maybe I should do this in private, but then immediately was like, no, I could just do it in front of the girlies. And so he's practicing and at the same time hanging out with Vesta, and Vesta's like, okay, as Dorian is like just like sitting there wishing. The spider was like, yeah, shifting is just like wanting stuff, and then it like changes, you know? So Dorian is just like sitting there wishing, and Vesta's like, hey, you could like actually be practicing something useful, like sparring maybe. Dorian is like, no, because I know I can shift. I can like feel that it's possible. I just need to convince my magic to participate. Like I need to convince my magic, get my magic on board with the shifting. Be what you wish to be, Serene had told him. Nothing. He wished to be nothing. But Dorian kept peering inward, into every hollow, empty corner. He needed only to do it long enough to master the shifting, to sneak into Moranth, to find that third key, and then to offer up all he was, all he had been, to lock into the gate. And then it would be over. For Erewhon, yes. And for him. Okay, this made me so sad. Like, Dorian, my beloved sweet boy. I don't love that. But Dorian is like kind of depressed. Meanwhile, Manon and Astrid are working on carving brooms because the witches obviously use brooms to like fly around. And Manon's like thinking to herself, like, we can't just fly with the Crocians and hope eventually they'll be like, Manon, you can be the queen. Like, they needed to learn about them. They needed to like figure out what made them tick, what made them work. And then they delivered these brooms to their new owners. You really think it's worth our time? Astrid muttered when the second and the third witch sneered upon receiving their brooms, playing servants to these pampered princesses. Because every one of them is just like sneering, I mean like annoyed at them as they deliver their brooms. Honestly, reasonably, let us remind ourselves that the Crocians have been hunted and brutally murdered by the Iron Teeth year after year after year. So to have Manon show up and be like, hi guys, I'm your friend now. I know I've murdered a lot of your siblings, but now I want to be your buddy. Like, it's making sense that the girlies are not super interested in that. Honestly, it's pretty reasonable. Even though we love Manon, she was kind of like a war criminal for like kind of a while, you know? Like, the vibes aren't great. But then they go to this last rite. They give their last broom to this girl named Carson. I'm reading this name out loud for the first time, and Carson is like such a normal girl name, but it's spelled weird. It's spelled Karsyn, but I think it's pronounced Carson. She doesn't sneer at them, and they wind up talking about the wyvern. She like asks a question about the wyverns, and they're like chatting, and she's like, oh my gosh, your wyvern, to Manon, seems kind of like a dog. And Manon has to remind herself that this is not an insult, that the Crocians love dogs, that they keep dogs as pets, and this is not this is not an insult, because obviously the Iron Teeth do not have dog pets, and so to compare a Braxis to like a dog is kind of rude, but it's nice. And Manon says to Carson, his name is Abraxas. He is different. Abraxas is a special little gem. And then Carson is like, yeah, did you know that it's like really sweet that him and the blue one are mates? And Astrid is like, excuse me, what? Because the blue one is Astrid's wyvern. The Croatian pointed to the blue mare huddled beside Abraxas. He is smaller, yet he dotes on her. Nuzzles her when no one is looking. This is very sweet. This is very sweet. Okay, great. Manon exchanged a glance with Astrid. Their mounts incessantly flirted, yes, but to mate? Interesting, Manon managed to say. You didn't know they did such things? Carson brows nodded. We knew they bred, Astrid stepped in at last, but we haven't witnessed it being for choice. For love, the Croatian said. Manon nearly rolled her eyes. These beasts, despite their dark master, are capable of love. When Carson was gone, Astrid remained and stared at Abraxas and Nareen, that's her boyfriend's name, scratching her hair. You really think they're mated? Abraxas lifted his head from where it rested atop Nareen's back and looked towards them, as if to say, it took you long enough to figure it out. Actually, if you could just stab me immediately in the chest, this is the cutest thing I've ever heard. Abraxi has a little girlfriend. He's in love. I love Abraxas so much. I love Abraxas so much. That night, Manon and Dorian are in their tent, and they're just, like, chatting. And Manon's like, what am I supposed to be doing? And Dorian is like, just watch my eyeballs and tell me if they change. Are they changing? He hasn't explained to Manon, like, that his plan is to shapeshift so he can get into Moranth. But, like, you know, Manon knows that he's practicing changing. Manon gave him a look that might have sent a lesser man running. They are still blue. Gods above, she was beautiful. He wondered when it would stop feeling like a betrayal to think so. Poor little Nugget. He's still, like, so sad over losing Zorsha. Aww. And then Manon is starting to ask him about this, like, the shifting magic and how the shifting magic feels different. And then as they're talking about that, she's like, what kind of magic is your favorite? And Dorian says, I like ice the best, Dorian admitted at last, realizing he'd let the silence drip on. It was the first element that came out of me. I don't know why. And Manon's like, that's surprising. You're not a very cold person. He arched a brow. Is that your professional opinion? Manon studied him. You can descend to those levels when you are angry, when your friends are threatened, but you are not cold, not at heart. I've seen men who are and you are not. Neither are you, he said a bit quietly. The wrong thing to say. Manon is like, ew, get away from me. You think I'm soft and warm and cuddly and nice? No. I am 117 years old, she said flatly. I've spent the majority of that time killing. Don't convince yourself that the events of the past few months have erased that. Keep telling yourself that, Dorian says to her. He doubted anyone had ever spoken to her that baldly, relished that he did now, and kept his throat intact. I am not a soft-hearted Croatian, and I will never be, even if I wear the crown of stars. And Dorian says to her, is it so bad to care? And Manon says, I do not know how to. Ridiculous, an outright lie. Dorian found himself saying, you do care. You know it too. It's what makes you so damned scared of all of this. Caring doesn't make you weak, he offered. Manon says to him, then why don't you heed your own advice? I care. His temper rose to meet hers, and he decided to help with it. Decided to let go of that leash he'd put on himself. Let go of that restraint. I care more than I should. I even care about you. Manon says, then you're a fool, and she storms off. I'm sorry. Dorian and his healing power is going to heal Manon. It's going to heal her. She has, like I just talked about, she's been 100 and whatever many years, 116 years, just being a ruthless murdering machine. Maybe not when she was 2. Maybe they give him a couple years to grow up before they start turning him into ruthless killing machines. But like close to that. And you know what's going to heal her? This boy with his baby blues and his flirting capabilities. His flirting skills are his true magic. He says he likes ice best. Not true, Dorian. You like flirting best. And you're the best at it. It's gonna heal the world. Manon goes and tries to sleep in Astrid and Sorrel's tent, just like kind of like ruminating on those words that Dorian said to her, but it's uncomfortable. It's like too crowded in there, and she leaves and winds up coming back to the tent with Dorian. And in the morning, she looks over at Dorian, and she goes, your eyes are brown. He finally did it. He turned his eyes brown. And then it's time for them to leave to Ellywe. Meanwhile, back in Aelin, check-in time. Aelin's been in her coffin for a while. It's quieter at this camp that she's been brought to, but it just leaves more room for her magic to build up. Like, there's less to distract her from. And she can just, like, feel the magic just, like, boiling under her skin. So Karn comes and gets her and straps her to this metal table in the middle of this war tent, which is clearly where he's staying. Like, she can, like, see his dresser and his, like, bed. She can see the sky through the ceiling, and that the, like, smoke is supposed to go through in the tent. And it's nearly dawn. Like, it's nearly dawn. When are Rowan and the gang supposed to get her? Dawn. Well, just before dawn. They're coming. All I'm saying is this moment, they're coming soon. Karn ran a hand down the table's metal edge. I've been debating what to do to you, you know, how to really savor this. Make it special for both of us before our time is through. And she looks around the room and she notices that he has several braziers, which are just like essentially burning little pots going throughout the room. And then he says to her, We've played with your hands before, Karn said. Ellywe began shaking. Began tugging on the chains anchoring her arms above her head. His smile grew. Let's see how your entire body reacts to flame without your special little gift. Perhaps you'll burn just like the rest of us. Essentially what he's planning, and what she's kind of realized he's planning, is taking these braziers, these like burning pots, and putting them underneath the metal table which she's strapped to. It's gonna essentially like cook her. He's like gonna cook her on a stovetop. This wasn't just breaking of her body, but a breaking of the fire she'd come to love. To destroy the part of her that sang. He'd melt her skin and bones until she feared the flame. Until she hated it. And she hated those healers who had come again and again to repair her body. To hide what was real. What had been a dream. Karn, you can scream all you like if it pleases you. He's literally gonna heat up this entire table and like cook her alive. And he like pulls out these other tools. He has like this like case of like velvet roll of other like metal instruments. She began fraying then. Who she was had been melting away as her own body would soon melt when this table heated. The hand she'd been dealt. It was the hand that she had been dealt, and she would endure it. Even as a word took form on her tongue. Please. She tried to swallow it. Tried to keep it locked in as Karn crouched beside the table, flint raised. You do not yield. You do not yield. You do not yield. Wait. And Karn is like, oh, do you have something to say? He's about to light this brazier that's under the table, and Ellywe tells him to wait, and he says, do you have something to say? And she like considers, part of her, like, I don't even know if it's like a real part of her, but she thinks through, if she were to confess in this moment, she knows he wouldn't stop. That like, even if she confessed in this moment, she knows Karn would continue to torture her because Maeve is gone. So there would be no one for him to report to, and he would continue to torture her until Maeve returned. Ellywe made herself meet his stare. Her gauntlet-covered fingers pressing into the iron slab beneath her. One last chance. She'd seen the stars overhead. It was as great a gift as any she'd received. Greater than the jewels and the crowns and the art she'd once coveted and amassed in Rifthold. The last gift she would receive if she played the hand she had been dealt. If she played him right. To end this. And her. Before Maeve could put the wordstone collar around her neck. Plan at this point is Ellywe is essentially gonna try to get Karn so angry that he ends things for her. Cut to Rowan. Rowan is ready. He knows that it's 1.5 miles from where he is to get to Karn's tent. And Karn's tent is kind of like isolated a little bit away from everyone else. And he is ready to like literally kill anyone who gets in his way. He does not care who he murders. Like, he is feral. I cannot emphasize this enough. When the guards began their shift change, he'd rip the air from their lungs, would rip the air from the lungs of every soldier in his path. How many would he know? How many had he trained? A small part of him prayed that the number would be few. That if they knew him, they'd be wise and stand down. He had no intention of stopping, though. He's like, I literally don't care if this is my BFF. If anyone's stopping me from getting to my girly, it's not going to happen. A killing calm had settled over him hours ago, days ago, months ago. He was going to leave either with Karen or Ellywe. Like, whoever, if he got there and Ellywe wasn't there, he'd take Karen, but obviously, like, Ellywe would be the priority. He's like preparing. It is not quite time yet, but then he feels this like this voice inside of him, this like incredibly insistent tug to go now. Now, Prince. He knew that voice, had felt its warmth, and if the Lady of Light herself whispered in his ear, and so he starts running. Meanwhile, Lorcan is busy. Let's guess what Lorcan is thinking about. If you guessed Elide, you would be correct. He is so worried about Elide, who is, like, again, like I said, hidden in the forest, waiting for them. And he hopes that she'll stay safe. And also, like, if something were to happen, that she will be able to, like, that, one, she won't try to come for them. And two, that she will be able to make her way safely out of the forest. And he's also, like, watching. He's waiting for their signal. He knows it's too early for Rowan to make his signal. But Lorcan starts to feel death coming from the camp. As we know, Lorcan has, like, death magic. And there's just, like, waftings of death coming out from the camp. And he's like, suspicious. Back with Ellywe. Ellywe swallowed twice, the portrait of uncertain fear as she lay chained to the metal table, Karn waiting for her answer. Then she said, her voice cracking, when you finish breaking me apart for the day, how does it feel to know that you are still nothing? Karn grins. Some fire left in you, it seems. Good. She smiled back through the mask. You were only given the oath for this. For me. Without me, you're nothing. You'll go back to being nothing. Less than nothing, from what I've heard. Karin's fingers tightened around the flint. Let's keep talking. See where it gets you. A rasping laugh broke from her. The guards talk when you're gone, you know. They forget I'm Fae too. I can hear, just like you. This moment is like so amazing. And so, because Aelin has like barely been speaking over these days. She's like lost the ability to speak because she's been like brutally tortured for 2 months. And in this moment, she is like digging into like that assassin swagger inside of her, her fire, her flames that are deep inside of her Fireheart, and she's using it to bully this man. And he deserves it, obviously. Has any man deserved it more? No. And I truly and simply would lay down on train tracks for Aelin Galathinius and then say thank you for the opportunity. Like, I love her so much. She's so incredible. And Aelin continues, at least they agree with me on one front. You're spineless. Have to tie people up to hurt them because it makes you feel like a male. Aelin gave a pointed glance between his legs, inadequate in the ways that count. A tremor went through him. Would you like me to show you how inadequate I am? And Aelin is thinking to herself, she knows that if she dies, Dorian is going to have to sacrifice himself. Like, Dorian will be the one to have to forge the lock. They will both die. If she dies in this moment, Dorian will also die. And she hates that, but she also feels like she has no choice. Like, she knows that if Maeve puts the collar on her, she's going to find out where the word keys are. Like, she's not going to be strong enough to be able to resist the Valg and the torture. And so she's like, okay, I like have to do this. And Aelin continues to take a few more jabs, a few more digs at Cairn, just trying to get him riled up. And then Cairn starts like punching her in the stomach and then slams her head into the metal table. And then he pulls her over to one of the braziers that are already on. So he like grabs her off the table. He puts her in it. It is burning her. It is already heating up the mask and the chains. Like, it is already starting to like burn. Cairn leans in and whispers, I'm going to melt your face so badly that the healers won't even be able to fix you. And then she leans back and slams herself into Cairn. And she tries to take off running, but the chains are so heavy, she almost immediately falls to the ground. Cairn reaches further and like pulls her down. She slams onto the ground. Then he starts punching her again. He's trying to grab an iron poker. And Fenris is just watching all this from the corner, and he is just like crying and whimpering. And then Aelin slams her face into Cairn's head, because remember, she has an iron mask on, so she slams that into Cairn's head. And then Cairn grabs her and throws her across the room. She like lands against the dresser with like an audible snap, and something inside of her like breaks. Fenris had seen his twin drive a knife through his heart, had watched Connell bleed out onto the tiles and die, and then had been offered to kneel before Maeve in that very blood as she bade him to attend her. This is a detail that I like did not recount. Like, this is horrifying. Just like absolutely vile. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I like totally get Maeve. Like that makes sense. She wanted to be in a room, like in a world where she could see the color blue. And Doranelle is kind of like a cutie place. I understand that she's evil, but I like kind of get it. But then I see things like this and I'm like, JK, I don't get it. Maeve, this is despicable. He'd sat in a stone room for 2 months, witness to what they'd done to a young queen's body. Her spirit had been unable to help her as she screamed and screamed. He'd never stopped hearing those screams. But it was the sound that came out of her as Cairn hurled her into the chest of drawers where Fenris had watched him arranging his tools. The sound as she made as she hit the floor that shattered him entirely. A small sound. Quiet. Hopeless. He'd never heard it from her. Not once. Despair showed in her eyes, true despair without light or hope, the sort of despair that wished for a death, the sort of despair that began to erode strength, to eat away at any resolve to endure. She blinked at him 4 times. I am here. I am with you. Fenris knew it for what it was, the final message, not before death, but before the sort of breaking that no one could walk away from. Before Maeve returned with the word stone color. Cairn rotated the poker in his hands, heat rippling off of its point. Fenris couldn't allow it. He couldn't allow it. In his shredded soul, in what was left of him after all he'd been forced to see and do, he couldn't allow it. The blood oath kept his limbs planted, a dark chain that ran into his soul. He would not allow it, that final breaking. He pushed upward against the bond's dark chain, screaming, though no sound came from his dark maw. He pushed and pushed and pushed against those invisible chains, against that blood-sworn order to obey, to stay down, to watch. He defied it. All that the blood oath was. Pain lanced through him to his very core. He blocked it out as Cairn pointed the smoldering poker at the young queen with a heart of wildfire. He would not allow it. Snarling, the male inside of him thrashing, Fenris bellowed at the dark chain binding him. He shredded into it, biting and tearing with every scrap of defiance he possessed. Let it kill him, wreck him. He would not serve, not another heartbeat. He would not obey. He would not obey. And slowly, Fenris got to his feet. Aelin is like crumpled on the ground in the corner, and Fenris is rising is standing up, and Karen is like telling him to stand down, but Fenris isn't listening, and Aelin knows that he is breaking his blood oath, and then she knows that it will kill him. She knows that as his nose starts to bleed. And Karn is starting to look a little nervous, obviously, because, like, you know, like, Big Bad Karn has really only had to deal with people tied up or bound by a blood oath. And Fenris looks at her, and everyone in the room, Karn, Aelin, both of them know that Fenris is just begging for her to run. And Karn says to Fenris, she can't run. She has a shattered spine. Fenris leaps for Karn, completely severing his blood oath. And, like, it's over. He, like, has completely snapped the blood oath. And I just think this is such a powerful moment, because let's think about another moment in which a little friend could not snap his blood oath. Lorcan holding his girly pop Elide. He couldn't snap his blood oath for that. Which is kind of embarrassing, to be honest. Like, it will surely kill him, and it's also, like, incredibly difficult. And he's just, like, the coolest. We love Fenris so much. 10 out of 10. Fenris and Karn are wrestling around on the floor, but Karn knows he only needs to hold Fenris off for a while. Like, he doesn't actually need to win against Fenris. He just needs to kind of wait it out, because Fenris is, like, dying. Is, like, actively dying and has, like, not that long left alive, and definitely not that long left before he, like, loses all strength. And Aelin grabs the poker, the fire poker that Karn was using, and uses it to, like, stand. And Fenris is telling her, like, run, run. And this time, she listens. Aelin did not hesitate. She sprinted for the tent flaps and beyond it into the morning. She's running, and she has her iron mask. I put her iron mask back on because I do think we need to picture that the fact that she's running through this camp with this iron mask that she can barely see out of. She has heavy iron shackles on her arms and on her wrists, and she is running, and she's in this, like, tiny little white shift. Meanwhile, Rowan has half a mile left before he's at the center of camp, and he's killing people left and right. Some people are turning around and running when they see him, but the rest he's, like, suffocating, ripping the air out of their lungs without a second thought. Like, he does not have time for this. He doesn't have time for mercy. He is literally, like, killing calm, does not care. He would signal Lorcan and Gabriel in a minute when he needed a distraction for the way out, but he's, like, doing well on the way in. He's like, here, we have a map. This is where we are. Rowan is headed up. And Aelin is headed out. And they're gonna miss each other. Cut to Aelin. Aelin is running east, and she can barely breathe through the slit in the mask. She can hear the commotion behind her. It's literally Rowan cutting people up, but she has no way to know that. And she says, okay, that's not my business. I gotta go. I don't care what is happening behind me. They could be having a cool fireworks show. They could be having a big giant fight. They could be having a tornado back there, and it's not my business right now. I'm going this way, out of here. And when the first of the soldiers blocked her path, shouting to stop, she angled the iron poker and did not falter. This girl just had her back broken, shattered. Her spine is shattered. She is, like, literally just burnt alive. She's wearing an iron mask, chains, and shackles, and she is still cutting people up. A true hero. Death sang to Lorcan. And Lorcan and Gabriel are kind of, like, watching this from the sidelines. They can tell from, like, the bird situation, because a lot of Maeve's fleet can turn into birds. She loves a Fey warrior who can turn into a bird. Are, like, in their bird form trying to, like, get at Rowan. And so they know that Rowan is in the camp, but they're waiting for the signal that he needs a distraction so he can get out of the camp. But Death began beckoning elsewhere from the camp, moving closer to them, moving fast. Lorcan scanned the brightening sky, the first line of tents, the entrance with the guards. Someone's making a move this way, Lorcan murmured to Gabriel, but Whitethorns is still over there. And so he sends Gabriel to the north to guard further north and kind of, like, make sure this whole side is taken care of, because it's unclear if it's, like, a friend or a foe coming this way. He doesn't know if it's, like, someone who's, like, on the attack, or if it's, like, you know, Asar's sister, like, who it possibly could be coming this way when Rowan is, like, still very much in the center of camp. But, like, and he's, like, kind of waiting in the entrance to this forest where he's supposed to meet Rowan, but, like, the Death's call becomes too loud. He, like, cannot ignore it anymore, and so he starts heading for camp. And he almost immediately sees Aelin running towards him, iron mask on, shackles, little shift. Lorcan did not expect the sob in his throat as she raced between the tents, as he beheld the iron mask and the chains on her, hands still bound, as he beheld the blood soaking her skin, the short white shift, her hair longer than he had last seen it, and plastered to her head with gore. His knees stopped working, and even his magic faltered at the sight of her wild, desperate race for the edge of camp. 10 soldiers converged on Aelin, blocking her path into the forest. They've, like, finally caught up with her and realized that, like, she's escaping. And they start to try to fight her. One swung his sword, a strike that would cleave her skull in two. The fool didn't realize who he faced, what he faced. That wasn't a fire-breathing queen bound in iron who charged at him, but an assassin. That's Elena. With a twist, arms lifting, Aelin met that sword head-on, just as she'd planned. The male's sword fell short of his intended target, but hit precisely where she wished, in the center of those chains that bound her hands. Iron snapped. Then the male's sword was in her freed hands. Then his throat was spraying blood. Aelin whirled, slamming into other soldiers who stood between her and freedom. Even as he ran for her, Lorcan could only gape at what unfolded. She struck before they knew where to turn. Slash, duck, lunge. She got her other hands on one of their daggers. Speechless. Like, how can you, I love this, the idea that, like, she in this moment is not, like, the fire-breathing queen of Terrasen. Because she doesn't have her magic. She doesn't have access to that. But, like, Selena was fierce. And they are facing off against Ardalan's assassin. And Ardalan's assassin knows how to fight some boys. Lorcan is, like, running for her. But they're, like, still pretty far apart. Like, Lorcan can see her, but, like, they're still pretty far apart. Lorcan's signaling for her to run to him, like, being like, hey, come over here, I'll help you. But they're still separated by a really large hilly field, and he doesn't know how she's going to manage to cross that distance. She looks so weak. Archers are shooting at her. She's, like, running in a zigzag, so they have a harder time hitting their target. She looks frail. Like, she is bleeding and bloody and, like, clearly, like, withered away. She is, like, the 2 months have done damage to her person. She doesn't have very much muscle left. And Lorcan's at the same time trying to shoot magic to Whitethorn to signal to him that they've got Aelin. Like, get out of there, we've got Aelin. It's so good. It's so good. I can, like, really picture it in my head. And I want you to know that if I suddenly came into a very large sum of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars, because you would need a lot of money, I would make this into a TV show. I would buy the rights. I don't know who has them. I'm sure someone has them at this point. Probably work with a production company so they can help me out. But I'll fund it. I'll self-fund. I'll self-fund the Throne of Glass TV show. I need to watch this with my eyeballs. Oh my gosh, I need to see it with my eyeballs. Like, sometimes I feel robbed that this is actively not a TV show right now. Like, I need to see it with my eyeballs. Please. I don't have a gajillion dollars, but if I did, I would put all of them towards watching this. I need to see it with my eyeballs. I need to see it with my eyeballs. Gabriel has noticed Aelin and joins her and puts a shield around her. He can't get, like, right next to her because if he touches her, the iron will zap his magic. But he gets close enough where he can put a shield around her so they don't have to worry about the arrows anymore. And Lorcan is now, like, killing the soldiers that are running towards her with, like, a black wind as they try to leave camp. And then he kind of, like, makes a wall so, like, no other soldiers can leave camp. Or if they do, they make it to the forest, and as they're making it to the forest, Rowan in hawk form flies over them. And Lorcan opened his mouth to shout what, he didn't know, but a cry pierced the blue sky. The sob that came out of Aelin at the hawk's bellow of fury cracked Lorcan's chest. But she kept running, for the trees, for their cover. Lorcan and Gabriel fell into step beside her, and when she again stumbled, those two thin legs giving out, Lorcan gripped her under the arm and hauled her along. And they, like, make it into the forest. And Rowan emerges into his human form, and Aelin just moans the name Fenris, like Fenris is still in there. It took Lorcan a moment to understand, took her pointing behind them to the camp as she said it again, as if her speech was beyond her. Fenris, her breath was a wet rasp, a plea, a broken, bloody plea. And Rowan says to Gabriel, you're with me, Lorcan, get her to the glen. Rowan goes back into the camp with Gabriel to go get Fenris. And we follow them. It is much easier for Rowan to get back into the camp because they've murdered, like, half the people there. Also, it's, like, totally in chaos. And also, people are not expecting them to run back in. So they're able to get back in and get to Cairnstead without much issue. And we get, like, Rowan's perspective on the events that just happened. That they'd found her. Or she had found them, it seemed. And when Rowan had seen her, first from the skies and then beside her, we had smelled the blood both on her own and others. When he'd beheld the chains and the iron mask clamped over her face. When she was sobbing at the sight of him. Terror and despair coating her set. The rage that roiled through him had no space for mercy, no room for compassion. They get to the tent, and it's, like, quiet in there, and it's a little bit worrying. They're like, what the heck is going on? And they get inside, and Fenris is alive, but barely. He's, like, lying collapsed on the floor, and Karn is also badly injured, and he is unconscious. And Rowan sees the iron coffin and the metal table unlit with, like, with the unlit braziers underneath it, and, like, puts together that this man was about to cook his wife alive. And Rowan says to Gabriel, like, heal him. Not Fenris, who's, like, bleeding out on the floor. We'll deal with him in a minute. Heal him to Karn, because Rowan needs this boy awake for what he's about to do to him. And he looks at the instruments of torture that have been laid out on black velvet next to this table. Her blood sang to him of pain and despair, of utter terror, his Fireheart. And so Gabriel and Rowan chain Karn up to this table. And then they wake Karn up, and he sees Rowan, and he starts thrashing about, trying to break free. And then Karn beheld the frozen rage in Rowan's eyes, understood what he intended to do with that sharp, sharp knife. A dark stain spread across the front of Karn's pants. He did pee his pants. He did pee his pants. And Sarah J. Maas loves to let us know when someone pees their pants in terror. Rowan wrapped an ice-kissed wind around the tent, blocking out all sound, and began. He's about to skin Karen alive. We'll get a little bit more detail about it later, but like, he literally peels the skin off of this man and is sad that that's all he gets to do. Meanwhile, Elide has just been in this glen waiting. She can hear the sounds of the camp going literally cuckoo bananas crazy a few miles away, and she's trying to figure out a plan of like what she's gonna do if they don't return, because obviously Elide's not just gonna be like, well, bummer. See you later, guys. Like, she's gonna have to figure out a plan to, one, get Aelin back on her own and probably get her boys back. Like, she's gonna have to figure it out. And so she's like thinking through this, but then Lorcan, followed by Aelin, walks into that meadow. And Elide is immediately struck by how thin Aelin is, and also how long her hair is. Like, her hair has grown like a significant amount since they last have seen her, which, you know, doesn't seem like typically what happens when you're like malnourished. It's like an odd amount because everyone keeps pointing it out. And Lorcan like says to Aelin, we'll wait here for them. And Aelin says, take it off. Lorcan looks at the chains on her wrists, but knows, and like immediately knows that they're not going to be easy to remove. The like lock on the chains is like incredibly difficult to open. It's not going to be something they can just like pick. Elide's looking at the mask, which is also locked onto her face with like a similar manner. Like, they can't just like break it open. And he does try to like pick the lock with the dagger, but it like isn't working. Take it off, Aelin says again. The queen's guttural words were swallowed by the moss-crusted trees. I'm trying, Lorcan said, not gently, although certainly without his usual coldness. The dagger scraped in the lock, but to no avail. Take it off! The queen began trembling. And then she grabs the dagger from Lorcan, and she's like, actually, I'm better at picking locks than you. Give me the dagger. And she's like picking at it, and then the tip of the dagger almost immediately breaks off in the lock. And Lorcan's like, we need a proper locksmith. Like, we are not going to be able to do this ourselves. Aelin stared at the broken blade, at the shard in the greenery crushing her bare, bloodied feet, her breath coming faster and faster. Then she dropped the dagger into the moss and began clawing at the shackles on her arms, the gauntlets on her hands, the mask on her face. Take it off, she begged as she scratched and tugged and yanked. Take it off. Elide reaches a hand to stop her before she can, like, literally do damage to herself. Like, she is scratching so, like, fervently that she is going to hurt herself. But Aelin dodged away, staggering deeper into the clearing. The queen dropped to her knees, bowing over them, clawing at the mask. It didn't so much as move. Elide glanced to Lorcan. He was frozen, eyes wide as Aelin knelt in the moss. As her breathing became edged with sobs, he had done this. He had led them to this. Oh, this part, like, really hurts my feelings. The queen's gauntlets drew blood where they scraped into her neck, her jaw. She heaved against the mask. Take it off! The plea turned into a scream. Take it off! Over and over the queen screamed, take it off! Take it off! Take it off! She was sobbing amid her screaming, the sound shattering through the ancient forest. She said no other words, pleaded to no gods, no ancestors, only those words again and again and again. Take it off! Take it off! Take it off! She's, like, burning alive with, the magic of her magic that she hasn't been able to release. And also just, like, I think one of the reasons that, like, this scene, like, really is one of those scenes that, like, I think about a lot and really, like, gets me is because I can, like, imagine so, like, deeply, like, the claustrophobia of being, like, stuck in something like that, having something, like, covering your face and your hands and, like, not being able to move and feeling, like, so trapped, even being, like, free of this place, feeling so trapped in it still, and just, like, the panic that incites in you, and the fact that, like, no one can help her, and no one is even, like, no one can do anything, and she's just, like, trapped in these things. And pretty shortly after that, Rowan and Gabrielle emerge, and they're carrying Fenris. He's dying. Rowan is completely covered in blood, but it is not his blood. It's our friend Kieran's. And Rowan goes straight for Aelin, but she's still screaming, like, take it off, take it off, take it off. Her screams were unbearable. Worse than on that day in the beach in Ellywe. Slowly, Rowan knelt before her. Aelin. Julie tipped her head up to the forest canopy and sobbed. Blood ran down her neck from the scratches she dug into her skin, mingling with what already coated her. Rowan goes to, like, touch her, and she's still just, like, sobbing, like, please get this off of me. And Rowan is like, I just need you to be still, Fireheart. Just for a few moments. This is where I burst the blood vessel on my face, if you were wondering. Aelin stills herself, but Elide can see that, like, she's only able to still herself because she's, like, she can, like, see tremors moving through her. She's not actually, like, calmed herself down, but just, like, is essentially, like, tensed every muscle in her body to hold herself still. And Gabrielle's like, I've never seen a lock like this. Gabrielle, if you don't have anything helpful to say in this moment, I'm going to need you to zip the lips, okay? Elide is going over and sitting with Aelin. She's just like sitting with her and like putting a hand on her knee and just trying to like comfort her in this moment as the boys try to figure out what to do. And Lorcan and Rowan are like pulling at the chains that are attached to her, but they like can't break them. She was able to like break the chains that were on her between her wrists, because she's able to like pull them taut and like cut them, but like there's not enough, everything else, like the shackles and the mask are like too close to her skin for them to like get a sword in there with enough motion to like break them off. And Elide is like looking at Aelin and she just looks so defeated and hopeless. And Elide was like, asks her, she's like, hey Aelin, was there a key? And Aelin blinks twice. And Elide's like, oh, I don't know what that means. Hey, I don't know what that means. It means no. We know because we're in the know on the code, but Elide doesn't know. And then she mouths the word a key. I don't have them. We don't have them, Elide said, sensing the direction of Aelin's thoughts. Manon and Dorian do. Like they could only be unlocked using the word keys. Quiet, Lorcan hissed, not at the level of her voice, with the deadly information Elide revealed. I do think at this moment, do I normally think Lorcan is right? No. I love Lorcan. Is he right? Almost never. In this moment, I do think he was correct. Aelin just endured 2.5-ish months of brutal torture and did not reveal the location of the word keys. And Elide has not endured any torture at all and has been like, yeah, Manon and Dorian have the word keys, actually. Like, we do need to be a little bit quiet. We're, like, a mile away from camp. There are soldiers actively looking for them, so, like, maybe let's not announce where the word keys are, Elide. Okay, bestie girl? Love you so much, but be better. Aelin then, like, traces a shape with her finger in the moss, and it's the word key for open. It's the same symbol she used on the doors in that library in Ardelane, like, with Dorian, when they were, like, trying to lock that beast in the basement of the Ardelane castle. Girlie has to literally do everything around here. Does, like, no one else think of the word keys? Like, come on. I understand Aelin knows the word keys best, but it's not like these boys have never heard of a word key. Or a word mark, sorry. A word mark. Like, why is Aelin the one being like, guys, what if we used a word mark? Okay, she's done enough today. She is off duty. Get her out of this place. She can't do it because she's obviously wrapped in iron. And so she can't do it, and they can't use her blood because her blood is also laced with iron. And so Rowan slices his palm open and offers it to her and says, show me, Fireheart, show me again. And Aelin leans forward and sniffs his hand, and he says, I am your mate, Rowan whispered, as if it were the answer she sought. And the love in his eyes, and the way his voice broke, his bloodied hand trembling. Elide's throat tightened. And Elide's like, she can't do it with the iron on her hands. Like, she can't do the magic. Like, her blood won't work, but she also can't do the magic. And Aelin blinks in agreement. Rowan is like, okay, show me, Fireheart. And Aelin grabs his hand and guides him to trace the symbol on the shackle on her ankle. And Rowan is able to make the word marks well enough to get the shackles on her ankle to open and the lock on the back of her head, like everything to open. And she immediately bursts into flame the moment the mask is off of her. And Lorcan, like, literally has to drag Elide away because he's worried about his goalie. And Aelin is just, like, on fire in this whole field. Burns her clothes off, and Elide sees that aside from a bruise along her ribs, there was nothing. Not a mark, not a callus, not a single scar. The ones Elide had marked in those days before Aelin had been taken were gone, as if someone had wiped them away. They had taken her scars. Maeve had taken them all away. It told Rowan enough about what had been done. When he'd seen her back, the smooth skin where the scars of Endover and the scars from Cairn's whipping should have been, he suspected. But kneeling, burning in nothing but her skin, there were no scars where there should have been. The almost necklace of them from Baba Yellowlegs, gone. The shackle marks from Endover, gone. The scar from where she'd been forced by Arab and Hamel to break her own arm, gone. And on her palms, it was on her exposed palms that Aelin now gazed, as if realizing what was missing. The scars across her palms, the one from the moment they had become Karanum, the other from her oath to Nehemia, had disappeared entirely. Like they had never been. Her flames burned brighter. Healers could remove scars, yes. But the most likely reason for the lack of them on Aelin, on all the places where he'd once traced them with his hands, his mouth, it was new skin. All of it, save for her face, since he doubted they would have been stupid enough to take off the mask. Nearly every inch of her was covered in new skin, unvarnished as fresh snow. The blood coating her had burned it away to reveal it. New skin because they'd needed to replace what had been destroyed, to heal her, so they could begin again and again. And then Gabriel goes over to Fenris and he's like, hey, he doesn't have much longer. And Aelin silently crosses the meadow towards Fenris, and Rowan follows as close as he can given her flames. He could push through, shielding himself in ice or simply by cutting off the air that fed her flames. But to cross that line, to shove into her flames when too much had been stolen from her. And he can also just like read the distrust on Aelin. He knows that Aelin doesn't fully trust him in this moment, and he doesn't know why. Obviously, he imagines it has something to do with Maeve, but he's not like willing to take that away from her, to take that control away from her. And then he realizes in that moment that even his claiming marks on her neck were missing. Like every single mark of the life they had spent together, these months and time they had spent together, and her whole life lived, all of them are gone. And Rowan knows they don't have much time before they need to leave. Like, they're way too close to camp to just, like, hang out there. But he's willing to give Aelin a moment to say goodbye to Fenris. And she creates a shield around her and the White Wolf and leans close to speak to him. Slowly, painfully, Fenris has cracked open his eyes. Agony filled it, and yet something like relief and joy at the sight of her bare face. Aelin spoke again. The sound either contained or swallowed by her shield. No tears, only that. Sorrow and clarity. A queen's face, he realized, as Lorcan and Gavriel took up spots along the glen's border. It was a queen's face that looked upon Fenris. A queen who took his massive paw in her hands, pushing back the folds of fur and skin to unsheath a curved claw. And then she gives Fenris the blood oath, the only way to save him from death, a gift for his sacrifice. Aelin curled up on her side next to him, flames encompassing both of them. Rowan couldn't move. None of them moved. Aelin mouthed a short, curt word. Fenris did not respond. She spoke again, the queen's face unfaltering. Live. She'd used the blood oath to force him to remain on this side of life, yet Fenris didn't stir. Across the bubble of flame and heat, Elide put a hand over her mouth, eyes shining bright. She'd read the word on Aelin's lips, too. Aelin spoke a third time, teeth flashing as she gave Fenris her first order, live. Rowan didn't breathe as they waited. Long minutes passed, then Fenris' eyes cracked open. Ugh, obviously I'm crying again. I probably won't stop until the book ends. This is it. This is just me crying until the book ends. I hope you're having a fun time. And Fenris stands up and Lorcan is like, I cannot believe it. This is crazy. Aelin remained kneeling, though, even as Fenris surveyed them, surprise and relief lighting his dark eyes. His gaze met Rowan's, and Rowan smiled, bowing his head. Welcome to the court, pup, he said, his voice thick. And Aelin is just, like, staring off into the distance, petting Fenris. And Rowan is just, like, I can't even imagine what she's been through these last months. Like, I can't even begin to imagine it. Sometimes my notes are just, like, truly unhinged. Like, when I'm making these slides, clearly it's, like, late at night. My note says, she should really play Tetris. It's really good for your brain after trauma, which is true. Did you know that? They've done, like, studies, and it is, like, incredibly helpful if you experience a traumatic event. If you play Tetris, like, pretty quickly afterwards, the, like, eye movements in Tetris are, like, really good for helping your brain, like, process and store trauma correctly. So you, like, really drastically reduces your chances of getting PTSD. I don't think they have Tetris in Aurelia, but, like, just a suggestion. Gavriel is like, we need to go. And Lorcan says to Fenris, can you walk? And Fenris just glares at him. They're gonna fight later. He's gonna bite Lorcan later. And Elide's probably gonna hold Lorcan's hands back so Fenris can do it, to be honest. And Elide is like, which way do we go? And her question is answered almost immediately because the little folk emerge. And they emerge from the forest and they gesture for the group to follow them. Gavriel murmurs, they know this forest better than even we do. And you trust them? Lorcan demanded. Rowan's eyes settled on Aelin. They saved her life once. That night when Erwan's assassin had returned for Aelin. They will do so again now. Aelin doesn't do much except follow them when told and accept Rowan's cloak. So she is, like, naked except for Rowan's cloak that she's wearing. And she's just like, yeah, let's go. She's following them, Fenris at her side. And they hike pretty silently through the mountains, and it is just, like, the queen and the wolf walking together. And Rowan is like, this is, like, something of, like, stories from old. Like, this is, what a beautiful, magical moment. Can you picture it in the TV show? Oh, it would be so good. It would be so good. As they're walking, Rowan realizes that they're actually, like, pretty close to his mountain home that he shared with Lyra. And he thinks to himself he had always planned to take Aelin there someday, even though his home had been burned to ash. Like, there's nothing there for her to see. But he wanted to bring her to where Lyra was buried. Just like Aelin, like, brought Rowan to Sam. Sam mentioned that'll get me every single time. This video is rough. I think the next video is mostly better. I'm sure I'll cry again, but, like, I think it's mostly better. And then it gets dark again. But I think next video will be... I'm trying to think. I think next video is lighter. I can't think of anything super traumatic that happens next video. Maybe I'll cry a little less. I knew this one was gonna get me. I, like, think about that scene where she's, like, saying, like, take it off regularly and, like, just, like, cry unprompted in my ordinary life, so. knew this was gonna be rough. Anyway, Rowan is like hoping that they've been hiking like for a few miles now, and Rowan is hoping that they can find somewhere to like stop and rest soon, but also knows they like need to get to the sea as quickly as possible and like get off of the island of Doranelle. But Rowan is like, we can't really deal with that until the morning. We can like make a plan for how we're gonna get out of here in the morning, but like for right now, I need to get Aelin somewhere safe where she can sleep. And then the little folk disappear like behind this boulder, and Lorcan's like, could be a trap. But Aelin follows after them, like just immediately follows after them. And so Rowan followed her, as he would follow her until his last breath and beyond it. Okay, gorgeous. And they arrive in this like massive underground cavern, and Aelin is like glowing and it lights the place up, but it's clearly like a little folk town, essentially. Like there's all these little caverns cut into the walls, and there's like garlands and wreaths, and like it's just where they live. And Gabrielle, Lorcan, and Rowan are like checking for like safety, but Aelin didn't seem to have her usual like caution. Like you can tell that she's like unwell, because she's not being like cautious, she's not checking, she's like just very like almost like catatonic, you know? But she does go over to a branch where some of the little folk are hanging out, and she like chats very quietly with them. Rowan had never as much heard the little folk talking, but there was his queen, his wife, his mate, murmuring with them. And then she like finishes her conversation with the little folk and immediately finds a spot between a fire and a cave wall, lays down, and closes her eyes. Thank God we get a little break from the hot mess that is that is me telling you about the rescue crew. The take it off scene will rip out my guts every time. And we get to hang out with the witches. I also think I cry with the witches in this section, so it's not really that big of a break. We get a little break because we open with Dorian and the girlies and the Crocians are flying south to Ellywe, and we get this like moment where we learn that it took 3 days for Dorian to turn his eyes back to blue. Astrid and Vesta had teased him about it mercilessly as they had traveled down the spine of the fangs, dramatically bemoaning the absence of his pretty bluebell eyes, and had sighed to the heavens when his sapphire hue had returned. I love this so much. I love the like relationship that Dorian forms with like the 13, and just like the teasing joy that he brings them. Like he might be a little bit sad, but like his superpower of flirting has never waned, and I do think his flirting superpower, although he's not trying to woo, he's not trying to romantically woo the other 13, obviously his heart belongs to Miss Manon, but I do love his like friendship that he builds with these girlies. I like think the lightness and the joy that he brings is like so sweet and beautiful, and I love it. Anyway, they camp for the night, and Dorian is still trying to shift at camp, and Glennis is like, what are you doing that for? And Dorian's like, I mean, just like to see if I can, honestly. Like, there's absolutely no other reason. There's no other reason that I would do this except that I just want to see if I could. Maybe, you know, I definitely don't have an ulterior motive, if that's what you're asking. And Glennis is like, oh, interesting. Like, if you were successful, if you could successfully shift, who would you wish to be? He didn't know. Couldn't conjure an image beyond the empty darkness. Demarius, at his side, would have no answer either. Dorian peered inward, feeling the sea of magic that roiled beside him. Who do you wish to be? Who do you wish to be? He asked the barely woven tapestry within himself. Let the threads and knots take form, crafting the picture within his mind, starting small. And Glennis chuckled, your eyes are green now, King. Like this question, this allowing himself to like turn inward and reflect is what is allowing him to make these shifts. Who did he wish to be? Anyone but himself. But what he'd become. That night, they're at the campfire, and Glennis asks them, have you seen the waste? And have any of you seen the waste? And Astrid says, no, not one of us. Although I spent some time on a forest on the other side of the mountains, but, like, we never made it that far. We never made it over to the waste. And Glennis explains, none of us have either. We do not dare. And Astrid is like, because of us, the Iron Teeth. And Glennis says, no, for fear what it will do to us, to see what is left of our once great city, our lands. Nothing but rubble, they say, Manon muttered. And then Glennis asks her, and would you rebuild it if you could? Rebuild that city for yourselves. And Astrid says, we'd never discuss what we'd do if we could ever go home. A plan, Glennis mused, perhaps, would be wise. A powerful thing to have. Her blue eyes settled on Manon, not just for the Crocians, but for your own people. Who did the 13, the Iron Teeth or the Crocians, wish to build as a people? Then Etta and Briar race over, and we are like, hey, we scattered ahead to the rendezvous site, and it reeks of death. Like, it's not good over there. We need to go now. And so, although they were going to wait till morning to go to this rendezvous site to meet up with the witches, they go right now. They had been too late. Not by just an hour or a day. No, judging by the state of the bodies in the leaf-strewn clearing 20 miles south, the week they had been delayed had cost the Ellywe War Band everything. She had done this. Some got away, but most didn't, Etta announces. And there's just, like, ruins and, like, bodies around them. Like, this place has been razed the ground. And Manon is looking around and she's realizing that if they'd gotten there a week earlier, when they were supposed to, if they hadn't had that Iron Teeth encounter, that Manon orchestrated, that these women might still be alive. Probably would be still alive. Manon studied the shattered trees, the ancient oaks as broken as the bodies on the forest floor. Proof of who exactly had been responsible for the massacre. She had done that too. Bronwyn said, voice cold and low, what mortal band could ever hope to survive an attack by one of the Iron Teeth legions? Especially when that aerial legion was trained by such a skilled wing leader. Choose your words carefully, Ashton warned. But Una, the pretty brown-haired Crotian and another of Manon's cousins, gripped her silver-brown broom and said, you trained them. All of you. You trained the witches who did this. Una pointed to the decaying bodies, the torn throats, the killing that had not stopped at quick deaths. Not at all. Do you expect us to forget that? Silence fell, even from Astrid. Glennis said nothing. Manon's hands turned frail, foreign, the iron within them brittle. She had done this. The soldiers in the wide clearings were nothing and no one to her. Most were mere mortals, and yet... Yeah, I think Manon is such a fascinating character. I think particularly in Kingdom of Ash, as we are, again and again, like, force confront Manon's past and the choices that she's made and the damage that she's done. Like, Manon is the villain in these women's stories, and rightly so. And, like, is there really ever any coming back from the level of terror and destruction that she has done, not only as an individual, but also the systems that she, like, very actively participated in? And I think that's a question that Manon is really wrestling with throughout this entire novel, is like, okay, like, I believe what I did was wrong, but, like, I don't know how I go forward from here. And they're discussing what to do with the bodies, and Dorian offers to use his magic to burn them. Meanwhile, Bronwyn is like, I don't know, like, our first priority should probably be to warn the royal family of Ellywe. And Manon is looking at this dead woman who's at her feet, and she thinks to herself, who had she been? The warrior before her. Who had she fought for? Not kingdoms or rulers, but who in her life had been worth defending? Manon stared and stared at the slaughtered warrior, what she had once delighted in, what she had once flaunted before the world, and done with not a shred of regret. Only the wish that her grandmother would approve, that the Iron Teeth would approve. This is what they would be remembered for. What she would be remembered for. Erewhon's crowned rider, his wing leader. Don't burn them, Manon said. Silence fell in the clearing, and then Manon gets on her hands and knees and starts digging in the dirt with, like, her iron nails. And one of the Crotians makes to help her start digging these holes for these women, and Manon holds up her hand and says, only the 13, we will bury them. We will bury all of them. And the ground is incredibly tough. It is like winter. The ground is frozen. There are, like, roots and rocks that are, like, cutting up their hands, but they keep digging. The 13 keep digging for hours until they have a hole, like a big grave big enough for all of the bodies to be put in. Meanwhile, the Crotians actually receive a messenger back from the royal family. The women who had survived this attack had already sent word to the royal family, and they hear this back. The Crotian messenger had returned with a message from the king himself. The loss of the war band was grave indeed, but not Ellywe. But Ellywe was not broken by it. The rebels and gathered forces were still resisting Morinth. Still unbroken. They would continue to hold the line in the south, would do so until their final breaths. But, like, the subtext is clear. They don't have soldiers to spare for Terrasen. Like, Ellywe is not going to be helpful. They're, like, barely holding on. They can't help up north. And Dorian is like, okay, I, like, need to go. It is time for me to go. It is time for me to go get that last word key and, like, end this before we have to dig another mass grave. Like, I can't see the loss at this level anymore. Like, it's time for me to shift into something spooky, creepy, crawl my way into Morinth. And so he wanders off, and he is going to summon Gavin again. But this time, his summon isn't answered by Gavin. Dorian's magic flared, rallying to strike as the figure took form, as Caltaine Rompierre, clad in an onyx gown and dark hair unbound, smiled sadly at him. And Caltaine says, I mean you no harm. And Dorian's like, so the thing is, I did not summon you. I did try to call up Gavin. I don't know if there was, like, a mix-up in the afterworld or whatever, but, like, this is not what I wanted. And Caltaine is like, didn't you? And Dorian is like, I thought you were destroyed in Morinth. I heard you, like, were, like, destroyed in Morinth. And Caltaine says, I was. In many ways, I was. And Dorian says, I'm sorry. Caltaine, whatever for? For not seeing as I should have. For not knowing where they took you. For not helping you when I had the chance. And Caltaine is like, well, I mean, I don't know how many chances you actually had. Also, like, some of this is my fault. Like, I did make some bad choices, so, like, we can't entirely put this on you, Dorian. Actually, I would have put very little of this on you. And Dorian says, what happened to you in Morinth was not your fault. And Caltaine is like, no, it was not. And then Dorian goes on to say, you saved my friends. You gave up everything to save them and get that word key away from Erewhon. He would do the same if he could. Survive Moranth's horrors. I am in your debt. And Kaltain says, I never had friends of my own. I always like really envied you and Aelin. And Dorian is like, oh my gosh, you know who Aelin is? And Kaltain is like, I am dead. So yeah, they do tell you stuff once you're dead. But Dorian has some other questions about death, and he can't answer any more questions. He can't answer like she can't say whether it's like nice or not so nice when you're dead. Also, who is with her? Because obviously Dorian wants to know about Sorsha. And Dorian asks her about the word key, and she confirms that it's in Moranth. And Dorian's like, hey, so how did you resist the collar? I had a collar, and I didn't do a great job resisting, except when I needed to flirt with Manon. Besides that, I was like locked away. And Kaltain says, because I raged against it, because I did not feel that I deserved that collar. This is like a really tricky one for Dorian, because I think Dorian is really at a place in which he's feeling really guilty for how much he's kind of just like floated through life, and how much he has not done anything against the like great evil that was his like father and his father's empire. There's this like self-pitying sense of wanting to like kind of like self-flagellate for that I think really makes the thought of him getting a collar and being able to say like, I do not deserve this, and to like fight against it with rage, something that I'm not sure Dorian is super capable of. And Dorian says to Kaltain, am I ready to go to Moranth? Kaltain again glanced to Damaris. You know the answer. You won't try to convince me not to go? Dorian says. You will know, you know what you will face there. It is not for me to tell you if you are ready or not. And then Kaltain goes on to give him a few warnings about Moranth, to let him know that, like, it's worse than he could possibly imagine. Also, like, do not try to directly fight Erewhon. Okay? Don't do that. It's stupid. You will definitely lose. Like, get in, get out. Okay? And Dorian's like, so the thing is that I can barely shift, so I don't know if this will go well. And then Kaltain goes, can't you? And then she disappears. Something about Kaltain's little speech motivates him, though. So he digs down deep into his magic, and he thinks to himself, who do you wish to be? And he thinks, someone worthy of my friends, he said into the quiet night air. A king worthy of his kingdom. For a heartbeat, snow-white hair and golden eyes flashed into his mind. Happy, he whispered, and wrapped a hand around Damaris's hilt. Let go of that lingering scrap of terror. And then he turns into a raven. But it turns out Manon has been watching him the entire time from behind a tree, and so he like shifts back into a boy. And then Manon is like, hey, when exactly were you going to inform me that you were about to go try to retrieve the third word key from Moranth? When was that going to come up in our conversation? And that's where we leave the witches. I actually don't think we'll see them again. I think that is where we'll leave them for this video. Meanwhile, we'll check in with at Public Enemy #1, Blondie Boy 80, and not Gallon, the cutie patootie. Every day when I had to put Gallon in these slides, and he is this giant-headed baby, I regret the moment in Airfire where I made him this giant-headed baby without thinking. I like didn't think ahead to the fact that of course we see him later, and there's nothing I can do. It's too late. Anyway, the troops have been fighting Erewhon's troops for about 3 days, and it's going bad. Pretty poorly, one might say. And they've lost several miles of ground. Like, Erewhon just like keeps pushing them back. And Gallon is talking with Adian, and he's like, we need to retreat. Like, bestie, it's not going well. We got to get out of here. And Adian's like, if we retreat, they're going to chase us all the way back to Orinth. And Gallon is like, okay, like, fair, but like, we got to do something. Like, I will follow you wherever, like, you're in charge. I will follow you wherever you lead. But like, we cannot keep this up. Like, our men are dying at an alarming rate. The men have also started to grow pretty restless and upset about the fact that Aelin is not helping by burning people up. Like, she's not even out there fighting, because Lysandra has been fighting in wyvern form for the most part, or animal forms of some variety. She has not been fighting as Aelin because she can't fight as Aelin. One, she doesn't have fire magic, but even if she was like, oh, I can't use my fire magic right now because it's too cold out or something, you know, like if she were to make up some excuse for the fire magic, she does not have the fighting skills that Aelin has. Lysandra cannot be on the front lines because she is not a skilled warrior. Like, they taught her some stuff when they were on the boat back in Empire of Storms, but like not enough for her to realistically look like Aelin. Ansel supposedly has like a secondary army that's supposed to come in and help them, and they are waiting for that, but the phase magic is like running out, and if the phase magic runs out, like, they're toast, because the phase magic is the only thing holding back like the Ilkin and the Veld princes, and like, it's over. And Adian's like, okay. What if we moved north to Perrin and then use the Fae to freeze the river? Okay? We'll have the frozen river for us to cross. It shouldn't be too hard. It's pretty freaking cold out here. And then when Erewhon's army attempts to cross it, Gallon is like, Aelin will melt it. And Adian is like, well, you know, what if it wasn't Aelin? Because Aelin is actually so kind of busy right now. Actually, she like has started stamp collecting, and it is really taking up a lot of her time, and so unfortunately she won't be able to do that. But what if the Fae who froze it could just melt it? I'm sure they could do both, you know. It probably makes more sense for them to do both tasks anyway. Aelin could do something else like s'mores. She could be hosting like s'mores night for the troops to bring up morale. So yeah, don't worry about Aelin. Aedion then starts like thinking through other options. He like really doesn't want to retreat, but he really feels like at this point there's really no other way to survive this, especially given that they have no promise of ever getting Aelin back. Like Aelin might never return. Like they're hopeful, but like they might need these men to defend Terrasen in a year. You know, like they can't lose all of their military force fighting Erewhon in this moment because wars take a while. And so Aedion says to Galen, order the retreat. And so then we cut to Lysandra, and Lysandra's been making the march northward, this retreat march, as a horse. She has an injured man on her back who eventually dies, but it's so cold outside that he freezes to her back. Okay, so she just is walking around with a dead guy. Gross. And so many people are just like dying around her as they make this march. They were in bad shape before, and it's just like so cold out that like people are dying like quite quickly, and everyone around her is grumbling like, where is the queen? Where is her fire? Has she run away yet again? Ugh. And it's just like breaking Lysandra because she knows there's nothing she can do. Like her being like, hello, I'm Aelin, is not going to be helpful because she can't actually contribute anything of value that Aelin would be able to contribute except like her face. That's the only thing she has to offer these people. And she's just like so exhausted. She's so exhausted. She hasn't like slept. She hasn't eaten. And so she wanders into camp still in horse form. And in horse form, she wanders into Aedion's tent where Galen, Ansel, and Ren are chilling. And as soon as she gets inside, she shifts back into her human form in front of all of them. And that is like her last drops of energy. She is so exhausted that she literally collapses onto the floor naked. Like she just like does not have it in her to even like stand. Aedion gives her a cloak, and everyone kind of like clears out. Ren is like, I'm gonna go get you some food. Aedion kneels down next to her, nothing kind on his face, no pity, no warmth. And then the prince growled softly, your plan was bullshit. How could you ever be her, wear her skin, and think to get away with it? How could you ever think you'd get around the fact that our armies are counting on you to burn the enemy to ashes, and all you can do is run away and emerge as some beast instead? You don't get to pin this retreat on me, she rasped, the first words she'd spoken in days and days. You agreed to let Aelin go to her death and leave us here to be slashed to bloody ribbons. You two told no one of this plan and told none of us who might have explained the realities of war and that we would need a God's damned firebringer, not an untrained, useless shapeshifter against Moranth. Blow after blow, the words landed upon her weary heart. If you were so willing to let Aelin die, then you should have let her do it after she incinerated Erewhon's hordes. And Lysandra is like, it would not have stopped Maeve from capturing her. If you had told us, we might have planned differently, acted differently, and we would not be here. That doesn't make any sense, Aedion. Like, for one, you're being mean, but two, you're not even making sense. If you're going to be mean, you have to make sense. It was no one's plan. No one's plan. Look around. Do you see anyone whose plan it was to have Aelin get captured by Maeve? No. Lysandra wasn't like, I know, it'll be good. I'll pretend to be you, and you can get captured by Maeve and tortured for a couple months. No one thought that was a good idea. That was something that happened. There was no way to predict that. There was no way to prevent that. Yes, Aelin was planning to sacrifice herself, but she was going to, it was going to eliminate the Erewhon problem. This was, really supposed to be, kind of like a contingency plan, and also not really kick into place until they had defeated Erewhon's armies. I don't know what Aedion knowing about this plan would have done. I'm thinking nothing. Anyway, it gets worse. It gets worse. She stared at the muddy hay. Throw me out of your army then. You ruined everything. His words were colder than the wind outside. You and her. Get out of my tent. Lysandra is so exhausted she's not sure she can move. She's not even sure she can stand up and get out of there. And she's too tired to be angry at him to say the words that she should say back. He deserves a stern word. But she's too tired for it. Lysandra opened her eyes, peering at him, at the rage on his face, the hatred. She managed to stand, her body bleeding in pain, managed to look him in the eye, even as Aedion said with cold quiet, get out. Barefoot in the snow, naked beneath her cloak, Aedion glanced at her bare legs, as if realizing it and not caring. Lysandra nodded, clutching Ansel's cloak tighter, and strode into the frigid night. So this is horrifying behavior. Horrifying. She's literally not wearing clothes, exhausted after a day of battle. is just like in here to like get the 411, get the updates, and you're like, get out of here, you useless. This is all your fault. I hate you. You are the worst. Get out of here. Without clothes on? You get out. I don't know. I don't know how we come back from this, to be honest. How do we come back from this, Adian? I don't know if we can. It's just getting worse and worse. But now Adian's alone in the tent when Ren comes back with a bowl of soup for Lysandra and is like, Ham, where did she go? I brought her soup. She looked starving and like half dead. And Adian says nothing. And Ren is like, what have you done? What did you do, you freaking idiot? He's just like so upset that he couldn't manage to hold the lines and that they've been forced to retreat, that he can't even like feel the proper shame he should feel about saying those things to Lysandra. Like, he knows that was not appropriate. He knows he should be ashamed of what he said to her, but he doesn't even have space to feel that shame. And he also doesn't have space to plan what he should do next. He's just like so caught up in his own business that he can't do anything. And I think he shouldn't do anything. Maybe you're actually done, Adia. Maybe you are retired. We retire you. You get locked in a coffin for a while, just for fun, just for a giggly fun time. Like maybe only a week and not even iron. You could be in a wooden one. And then we let Gallon run, because you know what? Gallon seems nice and not like an absolutely unhinged person who throws women out into the snow naked when they're just out here trying their best. Doing literally the best they could possibly do with the hand they've been dealt. Okay. Anyway, we can't look at Adian anymore. Let's go check in on our girlies that'll make us cry. We come to the crew and they are all asleep in this cave that is like home to the little folk. And this is from Aylin's mind, what she's feeling. She had not trusted this world, this dream. The companions who had walked with her led her here. The warrior prince with pine green eyes, who smelled of Terrasen, him she had not dared to believe at all. Not the words he spoke, but the mere fact that he was here. She did not trust that he'd removed the mask, the irons. They had vanished in other dreams too. Dreams that had proved false, but the little folk had told her that it was true. All of this. They had said it was safe, and that she was to rest, and they would look after her. When she wakes up, she's still in the same place, and Fenris is laying right next to her, and Rowan is a little bit further back, and she can kind of see everyone there. And she's looking at her hand, and at the fact that she doesn't even have calluses anymore. Like, her calluses, her fingerprints, like, everything is gone. It's just, like, smooth skin, and, like, one scab from, like, something she, like, cut herself yesterday. Probably when she was, like, fighting people, or maybe when she was clawing at her own hands. Who knows? But she has, like, one scab from yesterday. She let off a little bit of her magic earlier as she, like, exploded into flames, but that was just, like, the excess, just, like, a little bit off the top. She still has a lot built up, and as she was sleeping, she even maintained this little, like, globe of flames around her and Fenris, this, like, protective shield around her. But even that is just, like, literally, like, just, like, skimming the surface so she doesn't, like, implode. She's watching Rowan sleep, like, across the fire, trying to convince herself that he is real and that he has really come for her. Oh my gosh. I have to tell you about the journey I had this morning when I was finishing up these slides. So I was finishing up these slides. I was like right here in the presentation, and I was on TikTok before I started. Like, I was literally sit down on my computer and I was scrolling on TikTok. Okay. As the slides were loading. And I encountered this video that I've encountered like many times, because there's a TikTok sound, if you're on a Throne of Glass TikTok, that is from the scene that I'm about to read you from Queen of Shadows, and it literally shattered me, because it is from the scene in Queen of Shadows when Aylin sees Rowan for the first time after I think they've only been apart for a few weeks. And I just like the difference in the greeting and like the way Aylin was able to greet Rowan in Queen of Shadows versus this, just like literally cracks me in half. Okay, I'm gonna read it to you because I want you to be crashed in half too. Okay, that's my goal in this. The male emerged from the fog, tall, maybe taller than Adian himself, if only by an inch, powerfully built and heavily armed, both above and beneath his pale gray surcoat and hood. Aylin took a step forward, one step as if in a daze. She loosed a shuddering breath, and a small whimpering noise came out of her, a sob. And then she was sprinting down the alley, flying as though the winds themselves pushed at her heels. She flung herself on the male, crashing into him, hard enough that anyone else might have gone rocking back into the stone wall. But the male grabbed her to him, his massive arms wrapping around her tightly and lifting her up. Aylin was laughing as she cried, and the male was just holding her, his hooded head buried in her neck, as if he were breathing her in. She was shaking from head to toe, and couldn't stop crying, not as the full weight of missing Rowan crashed into her, the weight of those weeks alone. How did you get here? How did you find me? Aylin withdrew far enough to study the harsh face shadowed by his hood, the tattoo peeking out along the side of it, and the grim line of his smile. He was here. He was here. He was here. Just the way in which she's just, like, been so broken, and she's unwilling to, like, even... Like, they've barely touched. Like, they only touched briefly when he was trying to get the shackles off of her. Besides that, they, like, barely touched. She, like, can't even acknowledge him. Because she's just been, like, so shattered by Maeve. And then Aelin stands up and she walks towards, just takes a couple of silent steps towards Rowan. Fenris doesn't even wake up in this moment. But when she's near Rowan, his eyes pop open as if he just, like, has always kept a feeling on her. And he says with his eye, he tries to have an eyeball conversation with her. He says her name, he says Aelin, with an eyeball conversation. And she, like, shuts it down immediately. She's, like, not ready for that. She ignored the silent inquiry, unable to bear the opening, that silent channel between them again, and surveyed the powerful lines of his body, the sheer size of him. A gentle wind kissed with ice and lightning brushed against the wall of her flame, an echo of his silent inquiry. Her magic flared in response, a ripple of power dancing through her, as if it had found a mirror of itself in the world, as if it had found the counter-melody to its own song. Not once in those illusions or dreams had it done that. Had her own flame leapt in joy at his nearness, his power. He was here. It was him, and he'd come for her. The flame melted into nothing but cool cave air. Not melted, but rather sucked inside herself, coiling. A great beast straining at the leash. Rowan. Prince Rowan. Rowan sits up and he's, like, covered in blood. Like, clearly he's tried to, like, rinse off a little bit, but, like, he's, like, covered in blood to the point that, like, you know, you can't get it out from under your fingernails into all of his clothes. And Aelin immediately recognizes the smell, like it's Kieran's blood. And Aelin asks him, is he alive? No. And she can see the rage on his face. Dead. Kieran was dead. The tautness in her body eased just slightly. Her flame, too, banked. How? No remorse dimmed Rowan's face. You once told me at Mistward that if I ever took a whip to you, then you'd skin me alive. His eyes didn't stray from hers as he said with lethal quiet. I took it upon myself to bestow that fate on Kieran on your behalf. And when I was done, I took the liberty of removing his head from his body and then burning what remained. A pause. A ripple of doubt. I'm sorry I didn't give you the chance to do it yourself, but we couldn't risk bringing him here or keeping him alive. And Aelin says to him, I'm glad. Like, I'm so glad that he's not alive. Like, I did not need to see that man's face again. And Rowan says to her, can I hold you? She scanned across the cave, blocking out the way his eyes guttered at her retreat. Across the chamber, the great lakes flowed, smooth and flat as a black mirror. I need to bathe, she said, her voice low and raw. Even if there wasn't a mark on her beyond her dirty feet, I need to wash it away. And Rowan is like, okay, there's some cloths that you can, like, wipe with. And then they have some of your clothes from Mistward. I don't know how the little folk got them. That's not our business. Rowan and I both say. But Aelin, like, walks past him and heads for the lake. And Rowan is like, hey, girlie, that water is, like, barely above freezing. So, like, maybe don't go in there, Aelin. But she jumps in the freezing lake. With each stroke beneath the surface, out in the darkness, she could feel it again, herself. Or whatever was left of it. Aelin, she was Aelin, Ash River, Whitethorn Galathinius, and she was Queen of Terrasen. More magic rippled out, but she held her grip. Not all. Not yet. She had been captured by Maeve, tortured by her, tortured by Karn, her sentinel, but she had escaped, and her mate had come for her, had found her, just as they had found each other despite centuries of bloodshed, loss, and war. Aelin. She was Aelin, and this was not some illusion, but the real world. Aelin. She swam out into the lake, and Rowan followed the jutting lip of the stone along the shore's edge. She dropped beneath the surface, letting herself sink and sink and sink, toes grasping only open, cool water, straining for a bottom that did not arrive. Down into the darkness, the cold. The ancient, icy water pulled away the flame and the heat and the strain, pulled and sucked and waved it off, cooled that burning core of her until she took form. A blade, red hot for the fire, plunged into water. Aelin, that's who she was. And Rowan's just watching her swim around in that freezing lake that he's like, it is so cold that, like, people would die if they were in it for more than a couple minutes. And he realizes that it's steaming where she is. Like, it is steaming and glowing. And he just, like, hadn't realized how much her magic was still, like, burning her up inside. Finally, she, like, kind of pops out from the water and she's like, you could join me. To Rowan. And Rowan recognizes immediately that it's, like, not an invitation to intimacy, where before, like, it would have been this moment of, like, an invitation into, like, you know, some makeout time. But it is this, like, invitation to, like, be with her, to, like, be physically present with her in a way that she hasn't really allowed yet. And Rowan is like, so thank you so much for the invite. And I love it so much that you are being a little bit more chatty and not looking like you're gonna die in any second. But I think I would freeze. Like, that lake is too cold for me. My magic would not keep me warm like you, and I would freeze to death. Also, I think you should get out before something eats you, because that lake is, like, super ancient and super dark and super scary, and I do think there might be a giant shark that is going to eat you up. But Aelin does ignore him and just continues swimming around. And Aelin says to Rowan, I didn't break, she said quietly. His heart cracked at the words. I didn't tell them anything. She didn't say it for praise or to boast, but rather to tell him, her consort, of where they stood in this war, what their enemies might know. And Rowan says to her, I knew you wouldn't. Like, there was no part of me that believed you ever would. And then Aelin goes on to explain that Maeve used to plant these sort of like these false memories, these dreams that felt so much like this. And Rowan is like, what sort of illusions? Tell me about them. And Aelin is like, she can't talk about them yet. She might not ever be able to. And she says, it doesn't matter. How long was I there? It took the entirety of his 3 centuries of training to keep the devastation, the agony for her from his face. 2 months, 3 days, and 7 hours. Aelin goes on to explain that the healers had healed her after every session, and Maeve made them grow her hair super long so she'd have no way to indicate kind of like how long she'd been there, the passage of time. And Rowan says to her, do you want me to cut it to the length it was when I last saw you? And Aelin says, no, I want it so I can remember what happened to me. Then Aelin confesses, Maeve was about to put a valve collar around my neck. She left to retrieve it. The scent of her lingering fear drifted towards him, and Rowan lurched a step closer to the water's edge. It's why I got away. She had moved me to the army camp for safekeeping, and her voice stalled, yet she met his stare. Let him read the words she could not say in that silent way they had always been able to communicate. Escape wasn't my intention. No, Fireheart, he breathed, shaking his head, horror creeping over him. There was no collar. And he explains that, like, that was the rumor that they started. It was, like, the way that they were going to distract Maeve so they could get in to rescue Aelin. And Rowan apologizes to her. He's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that it would, like, word would get back to you and that it would cause this. And he's so just, like, upset at the thought that, like, he could have lost Aelin not to Maeve, but to this rumor that he started. That this idea that he could have lost Aelin to those lies. Whew, like, rips him up. And Aelin is like, no, don't apologize. Like, you did what needed to be done, and I don't think I would be here if that hadn't happened. And then Aelin asks, what of the others? And Rowan kind of gives the explainer of where everyone else is and what they're up to. And then Aelin says, Maeve said you and the others were in the north, that you'd been spotted by your spies there. Did you plant that deception for her too? He shook her head. Lysandra has been thorough, it seems. Aelin's throat bobbed. I believed her. It sounded like a confession somehow. So Rowan found himself saying, I told you once that even if death separated us, I would rip apart every world until I found you. He gave her a slash of a smile. Did you really believe this would stop me? And she's swimming around, and an ancient boat emerges from the black gloom, being pulled by these, like, weird shadow eels, and Rowan is like, get back on the shore. No. I told you that ancient lake before something ate you, and now there's a scary, creepy boat, so get back over here. And Aelin does, but she's, like, very leisurely and slow about it, and Rowan doesn't love that. But because he was so loud about telling her to get back on the shower, everyone else is awake. And Lorcan, like, sees this boat and is like, we cannot take that through the caves. And Aelin is like, we are being hunted. The only safe way to the sea is through these caves. So yes, you will be taking that tiny boat. And Lorcan is thinking to himself, like, that cannot be true. There's, like, literally hundreds of miles inland. Like, there's no way the caves stretch all the way to the sea. And he's like, did they tell you that? Like, meaning the little folk. And Aelin is like, yes, the land is crawling with soldiers and spies. We will never make it above ground. And Elide's like, I'll go with you. I don't care. Ignore the big tall guy. He's annoying. We don't like him anymore. So I'll come with you. And then Rowan is like, we don't have time really to consider options, like, way best course of action. Like, we're going to get in that boat and go. And Gabrielle is like, cool. I'm not sure how we're going to navigate these caves, though. And Aelin is like, obviously, the little folk will escort us. Are you dumb? And then Lorcan goes, and what if they abandon us? And Aelin leveled unfazed eyes upon him. Then you will have to find a way out, I suppose. This little spark of Aelin's temper back. We love it. We love to see it. Eat him up. And then Aelin gets dressed, and Lorcan is like, why are they even trying to help us? Like, why do they care? The little folk gathered, and Aelin bows to them, and then they place a crown on a rock. Mab's crown, Gabrielle explains. And Aelin's like, it fell in a river. I don't remember, did we know that Mab's crown fell in the river? I'm kind of confused by this part, to be honest. A little confused. Like, I remember she was wearing Mab's crown when Connell got murdered by himself. Sort of. Maeve told him to, so it's confusing. I don't know what to say there, but I don't remember getting chucked into a river at the end, but maybe it did. Whatever. Do you want to know why? Gabrielle softly asked Lorcan as Aelin stood for the rock, nothing but solemn reverence on her face, because not only is she Brandon's heir, but Mab's too, and that makes her their queen too. Aelin met Gabrielle's gaze, the crown near glowing in her hands. Yes, was all she said as the boat sailed into the darkness. Aelin, like, has grabbed the crown and is taking it with her. She does not put it on her head because, again, remember last time she wore it, she was made to like kneel in broken glass. And it also had like an iron core, and I don't know if this still has an iron core, but like, she's not putting that back on her head right now, but she is bringing that with her. Elide is a little nervous once they get into the dark part of the cave, but the little folk have this like lantern that is lit with like a glowing blue glowworm, and they're just like floating along, and Elide's like, so like how long will this little boat ride take us? And everyone's like, we're not going very quickly. This is a pretty slow little boat situation. And we have like many miles to the coast, so probably a few days. And Gabriel's like, it would take 3 weeks on foot. But Elide honestly would rather go on foot if that was an option. She's feeling a little claustrophobic being down here. And Aelin is just like silently chilling, staring at the water and at her own hands. Elide is watching her, and she just like notes that like those wicked smiles, those like sharp edges, and like the joy of Aelin, the sass and swagger and the like jokes and the sarcasm, they're like missing. She just is like this empty shell. And Elide is just like glaring at Lorcan. She's just like, you did this to her. You did this, you stupid head. I should push you in that water. This is what's going through Elide's little nog. That had been the cost and the burden that Aelin and all of them would bear. That silence. That banked fire was because of him. Not entirely, but in some ways. Meanwhile, Aelin is sitting next to Rowan. They're not touching, but Rowan is like always right next to her and just thinking about what Dorian and Mana might be up to. And she's like, like if Dorian were to forge the lock and sacrifice himself, I would feel guilty for the rest of my life, but also that would be fine. Like, if he wanted to do that, like, if he took care of that, that would be one less thing for me to do. Like, Terrasen really does need me. Like, maybe it would be best if we had Dory do it. Sitting in silence as the boat was pulled through the gloom, she felt the weight of those stairs, their dread. Felt them wondering just how broken she was. You do not yield. She knew that had been true, that it had been her mother's voice who had spoken and none other. So she would not yield to this. What had been done, what remained. For the companions around her, to lift their despair, their fear, she would not yield. She'd fight for it, claw her way back to it, who she'd been before. Remember to swagger and grin and wink. She'd fight against that lingering stain on her soul. Fight to ignore it. Would use this journey into the dark to piece herself back together. Just enough to make it too convincing. Even if this fractured darkness now dwelled within her. Even if speech was difficult, she would show them what they wished to see. An unbroken firebringer, Aelin of the Wildfire. She would show the world what lie as well. Make them believe it. Maybe one day she would believe it too. So Aelin is not doing super well, but she's gonna try her best. Aelin like spends these days traveling, just like thinking, just like going through the dark, trying to like process the best she can and like pull herself together enough that she can like put on a brave face when she emerges from these caves, because she knows she's gonna have to. Like, she's not emerging to a place where she can rest and recover. She's emerging into, on one hand, war, and on the other hand, this like eternal sacrifice that's being asked of her. She's like sort of scheming, but like not really. Like, scheming has a playfulness. Like, I think Aelin's scheming always has like a playfulness that is just missing. This is like planning in despair. It's just like sadness, and like that's okay. It's okay. You get to have bad days, Aelin. And this has been a rough week. Fenris is still in wolf form and has not been in human form at all. And Aelin was gonna ask about it, but then was like, nah, you know what? Maybe it's not my business. Maybe it's just not my business. We're on day 4, and Rowan announces, like, we're entering Barrow White territory, and Elide's like, hey, cool, what's a Barrow White? And Lorcan is like, creatures of malice and thought. They love treasure but hate light, so hopefully they'll leave us alone because we have some light. Also, we saw them back in Air Fire. They were the, like, creatures that Aelin was supposed to fight at the beginning of Air Fire when she encountered the Val guy for the first time. In those, like, the tombs in the cemetery type situation. Okay. So that's happening, and then Aelin is like, stop the boat. And Elide's like, I don't know if we can just stop this boat. But the boat does stop. Aelin hops off. Rowan follows her, and then Rowan turns around and says, everyone else, stay on the boat. And Lorcan and Elide listen. Gabrielle and Fenris don't. They follow them on to the shore. So then we've got Elide and Lorcan, the only 2 losers who stayed on the boat, and they decide to take this moment to have a little bicker time. As you should. If you're the only 2 people left on the boat, I don't know if there's a little folk person on the boat, but if you're the only 2 people left on the boat, I think it's a great time to get your bickering out. But I love how this section from Lorcan's POV starts because it's funny. The queen had been reckless before Karin and Maeve had worked on her for 2 months, but it seems she'd had any bit of common sense flayed from her. He's like, oh my gosh, she'd been reckless before, but now, look at this. This is crazy. Why are we pulled over? Anyway, they're just like hanging out, and then he can tell that like Elide is like anxiously like looking towards the shore. And he's like, hey girlie, don't even worry. Barrow Whites are nothing to fear if you're armed with magic. And her dark eyes slid to him. Well, I don't have any, so forgive me if I remain alert. Also, I'm not worried about the Barrow Whites. And Lorcan is like, you know, she's like clearly worried about Aelin. Like, Aelin is like clearly not doing well. And Lorcan says, it will take time for her to readjust. We just got her back. She is with us now. Like, what more do you want? Like, give her time. And Elide's like, I don't want anything from you. Lorcan says, how much longer am I supposed to atone for this? Elide, are you growing bored of it? I hadn't realized you were even atoning, to be honest. Like, what are you doing? Lorcan's like, I came here, didn't I? For who exactly? Rowan, Aelin? And Lorcan goes, for both of them and for you. Elide, I told you on that beach, I want nothing to do with you. Lorcan, so one mistake and I'm your eternal enemy? Elide's like, she is my queen, and you summoned Maeve and told her where the keys were, and then you stood there while they did that to her. And Lorcan is like, you have no idea how, like, difficult it is to deal with a blood oath. None at all. Elide, Fenris broke the oath. He found a way. Lorcan, and had Aelin not been there to offer him another, he would have died. He let out a low, joyless laugh. Perhaps that's what you would have preferred. Elide, you didn't even try. Lorcan, I did. I fought with everything I had, and it was not enough. If she'd ordered me to slit your throat, I would have. And if I had found a way to break the oath, I would have died. She might very well have killed you or taken you afterwards. On that beach, my only thought was to get Maeve to forget about you, to let you go. Elide, I don't care about me. I didn't care about me on that beach. Lorcan, well, I do care. I cared about you on that beach, and your queen did too. Resent me all you like. I'm sure I'll survive. Fine. I love this. I actually feel like this bickering was like very lighthearted and nice. I needed it. Meanwhile, in this cavern, Rowan is like following her. There's a white in the corner, but Aelin and like whites can only be like killed with magic essentially. And Rowan like waits a second to see if Aelin will take care of it, but Aelin like literally cannot touch her power because if she unleashes a little bit, like she's gonna explode. Like she's really right on the edge there. And so Rowan like zaps it. And he tries to have an eyeball conversation with Aelin, but Aelin just like looks away. Time, he thinks to himself. It would take time for her to heal, even if he knew his Fireheart would like to pretend otherwise. And Rowan's like, hey, so we don't really have time to look for another exit. The caves are like the safest way out. So I don't know really what we're doing, but like, I think we should probably get back on the boat. And Aelin is like, I'm not looking for a way out. We're going to need funds for our travels. Also, God knows what else, unless the pitiful clinking I heard from your coin purse didn't indicate you were low on funds. Rowan thinks. That spark of wry humor, the taunting, she was trying. For his sake or for others, or maybe for her own, she was trying. He could offer her nothing less too. Rowan inclined her head. We are indeed in dire need of replenishing our coffers. And then Gabrielle's like, so, hey guys, all this coin and stuff, this does belong to the dead, just so you know. And Aelin is like, so actually the dead do not need to buy passages on ships or horses or like food or any of that stuff. So I'm going to take it anyway. And Rowan says, you heard the lady. And so they just start like shoving things in their pockets. And then all of a sudden Fenris shifts to human form and he announces, we needed more pockets as like explanation of why he shifted to human form. Aelin's lips curved into a hint of a smile. She blinked at Fenris 3 times. Fenris blinks once in an answer, a code. They'd made up some silent code to communicate when he had been ordered to remain in his wolf form. So he says, she asks him how he is and are you okay? No, she says, are you okay? And he says, yes. Fenris and Aelin hug and Rowan is at once glad that she's able to be touched and also feeling a little possessive. Like Aelin has not been able to like seek comfort from him in the same way that she has been able to from Fenris. And that feels like a little uncomfortable for him, but he like suppresses that because this is not about him in this moment. Aelin just says to Fenris, thank you. And Fenris says to her, like, we can talk about what happened to us when you're ready. And Aelin says to Fenris, I gave you the blood oath to save your life, but if you do not want it, Fenris, we can find some way to free you. Like, you do not have to be oathed to me. We can, like, let you go. And Fenris says, I want it. No trace of his usual swaggering humor. He glanced at Rowan and bowed his head. It is my honor to serve this court and serve you, he added to Aelin. And Rowan says, it is good to have you, brother. And Fenris says, as in kind of like way of explanation to Rowan and Gabrielle, she killed Connell, made him stab himself in the heart. Aelin's magic heats the room at that. Everyone kind of tell that she's like upset, but she doesn't stop shoving jewels in her pocket. And Gabrielle says to Fenris, we will make sure that the debt is paid before the end. The lion had never uttered such words, not towards their former queen, but fury burned in Gabrielle's tawny gaze, sorrow and fury. And so they're just like shoving crap into their pockets. Aelin, of course, is like being more selective because she knows what good jewelry looks like and she knows what will fetch the highest price. So she's like picking out the nicest pieces. But then she turns to Rowan and she picks up a pair of rings. I don't know the Fae customs, she said. The thicker ring held an elegantly cut ruby within the band itself, while the smaller one bore a sparkling rectangular emerald mounted atop, the stone as large as her fingernail. But when humans wed, rings are exchanged. Her fingers trembled slightly. Too many unspoken words lay between them. Yet now was not the time for that conversation, for that healing. Not when they had to be on their way as swiftly as possible. And this offer she'd made him, this proof that she still wanted what lay between them, the vows they'd sworn. She took his hand, and he tried not to shudder in relief, tried not to fall to his knees as she slid the ruby ring onto his fingers. It fit him perfectly. The ring, no doubt, forged for the king lion and the sparrow. Silently, Rowan grasped her own hand and eased the emerald onto it. To whatever end, he whispered. Silver lined her eyes. To whatever end. And then he says to her, I will make the tattoo again. She swallowed but nodded. And he added, I'd like to add another. To me and to you. And then they have a little eyeball conversation, which is like the first one that they've been able to have that Aelin like responds to. Like she only says a word back, but like they're back to having eyeball combos. And Rowan is about to ask her if he can kiss her when she like pulls away. And she like makes a comment about how she's gonna need to retrain and pack on some muscle, and how it'll be just like old times when they were training together in Mistward. Trying. She was dredging up that swagger and trying, so he would too, until she didn't need to anymore. Rowan gave her a crooked grin. Just like old times, he said, following her out of the barrow and back towards the Ebony River, but with far less sleep. Meanwhile, while that was going on, Gabrielle and Fenris did not stare and watch them like creepers. They did go back to the boat. And Lorcan is like laughing a little bit as they unload their pockets. And he's like, well, at least she's thinking one step ahead. Fenris, remember, this is the first time Fenris has interacted with Lorcan as a person. Fenris turns to Lorcan and is like, we're only in this position because of you. And Lorcan's like, okay, I was just reminded about that, so no worries. Top of mind. And Fenris says, when we are out of this, you and me, we're going to settle things. Lorcan says, it shall be my pleasure. And Elide knows he's serious. But also, if given the opportunity, I do think Elide would hold Lorcan's hands back. Also, Fenris would hold Lorcan's hands back so Elide could get a couple punches in. Also, Lorcan would hold his own hands back if Elide wanted to punch him, I'm pretty sure. If Elide was like, excuse me, Lorcan, I would like to break your nose, he would say, okay, let me lean down so you can reach, or would you like me to get you a stepladder? Like, Lorcan does love that girly. But anyway, him and Fenris are going to fight. Then, Aelin and Rowan get back on the boat. They've been traveling for a while, another few days. Aelin is sleeping when Rowan wakes her up. Glowworms, like those in the lantern, thousands of them, made infinite in the reflection of the black waters, stars above and stars below. Like, he wakes her up and he just says, look. And they're in this just, like, absolutely stunning room that is lit by these, like, phosphorescent, bioluminescent glowworms. A sea of stars. That's what the cave had become. Beauty. There was still beauty in this world. Stars could still glow, still burn bright, even buried beneath the earth. Aelin breathed in the cool cave air. The blue light let it flow through her. Rattle the stars. She'd promised to do that, had done so much towards it, yet more remained. They had to hurry. How many suffered at Moranth's claws? Beauty remained, and she would fight for it. Needed to fight. It was a constant thrum in her blood, in her bones, right alongside the power that she shoved down deep and dismissed with each breath. Fight one last time. That's where we're going to end. I felt like this is like not an even dividing of part one. Part one is the longer part of this, and an even dividing, I would do a few more chapters, but we're about to jump into the Battle of Enel, which will be like essentially the rest of part one, and I kind of wanted to do that all at once. So, do you know that's coming? The Battle of Enel is a large chunk of the rest of this. It's a good part. I'm pretty sure in the next video, if everything goes to plan, the next video will have my absolute favorite scene from Kingdom of Ash. The girls who know. If you've read Kingdom of Ash before, I like bet you know my favorite scene is, because it's a really good one, and it's in the next part. I also, like I said, I do think I cry less in this next part, which is exciting, because this part was rough. This part was maybe the roughest video we've had thus far. Did I cry off all of my concealer? Yeah. That's okay. Thanks for hanging out with me as I ramble about Kingdom of Ash, my favorite topic of conversation, for hours and hours every single week. Okay. I will see you next time, where we jump into the Battle of Enel and we have a good old time. And I think we cry less. I do believe in the next section we cry less. It would be difficult to cry more, to be honest, so we've got that going for us. All right. I'll see you then. Bye.